Hello everyone, I am the Enforcer, and today I'm coming with you to report the day 24 news and go over the past 24 hours of events. Tonight, I'd actually like to make a special note that I did have a little bit of free time in my setup tonight to actually take a look at the chat, and I'm going to answer one question that I saw a bit, just so that way everyone has a clarification of why it happens. Every day I say that the stream starts at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and it does, but it also kind of doesn't, because y'all can see that almost every single day it actually starts at around 10:10. That's because I have the stream set up and the broadcast starts at 10 o'clock, but there's still a couple of things behind the scenes I have to do that I cannot do until that stream is created. That has to happen before the stream goes live. And so I'm sorry to everyone that it is usually 10 minutes after 10 p.m., but that's the reason why, is because I want to make sure that I'm doing some things behind the scenes for my mods, so that way they'll have a much easier time managing the chat, because the mods mean a lot to me, and I'm going to do a whole bunch to help them out, because they are helping me run the server, and I'm very much appreciative for them running the server, the chats, and everything in between. So once again, everyone give a great shout out to our mods, because they do an incredible job at this. Make sure to give out a shout out to Matthew as well, because he's also doing an incredibly good job helping me out with the questions and such. So, moving on from that, we're going to do our usual schedule today. We're going to cover the northern area, which we actually do have a little bit of news on today. We will then stop in between the eastern front and the northern front for some questions. Then once I answer the questions, we're going to move on to the location unknowns. We'll then cover the one bit of news that we've gotten near the Kharkiv area today. Pretty much the entirety of the Eastern Front has been quiet today as far as video recorded evidence has been. We will then move on down to the Southern Front, where we will stop to take more questions, and then we will wrap up with the Southern Front. We'll also cover some of the international news and the news that lies around the rest of the country, which isn't much. Also, one more thing. I would also like to say, speaking about the chat, because I actually did get to take a good look at it. I love all of my fans, and I also love that y'all support Ukraine so much. So I'm gonna say this so that way everyone can look forward tomorrow. Tomorrow we will be running another fundraiser, much like we did last Sunday. This is going to now become a weekly thing. So we've picked out a new fundraiser. It'll go live on tomorrow's video. I hope y'all like it, because this organization is known for having doctors who operate without any regard nor concern for borders, if that gives you a little bit of hint of who they are. So now, that being said, we're now going to move on to the news of the Northern Front, starting off with Bring Out Your Dead. We can see that buses full of dead Russians were being transported through this town in Belarus. I'm going to show you this video. As you see, it's just bus loads of them. And the reason why we're assuming, since now the video's looped, that these buses are full of corpses, is that these windows are covered. And from what I was able to collect today, the only reason they cover these windows is if the inside of this bus is stacked high with stretchers or body bags full of dead Russians. So we know that based off of that, the Russians may be taking a decent amount of casualties, because I'm sure that this isn't a rare sight, and this may actually be a normal scene, and this is the first time we've ever seen it on video. So we're now going to move on from that little bit of news that we've gotten up in Belarus, and we're now going to start moving down a little bit closer to home in Kiev. We've known today, which this is also incredible news, that the Ukrainians have once again pushed the Russians back a little bit further as far as their encirclement has gone. We can see that large amounts of destruction has occurred on the Zhytomyr Highway, also called E40, and here are the pictures of that damage. We can see here the remnants of something Russian, and then a Russian T-72B3, from what it appears, completely destroyed, both of them burned out as well. We can also see here that we have what seems to be two T-72Bs. It appears that one's turret has flipped upwards. It's kind of resting on this bus stop. The other one appears to have just burned out where it was sitting. And then finally, in the last picture, we can see what appears to be that same picture from another angle now, this one, but now we're looking at it from towards the left side of this picture. And so we see the rear of this T-72B, and we also see this other T-72B that had the turret flipped up, and it looks like a decent amount of damage has been inflicted on Russian armor once more. T-72Bs, though, I do have to say this, because while it's always good to see Russian destroyed armor, this is not Russia's best. The T-72B is one of the more average, maybe below par Russian tanks in the army, but that's not trying to negate the fact that we have a T-72B3 in this picture, and this may have also been a T-72B3, but it was destroyed to such a point we can't really identify what that tank was, or if even it was a tank, it may have been an APC. We don't really know, so I can't really testify as to that one, but damage nonetheless. The Ukrainians are once again making progress and making ground. We've also seen interesting satellite pictures today, as it appears that the dam on the little river here, I forgot the name, the Irpin River. Yes, I forgot. For some reason I did, but we can see satellite pictures here of the before and after. It appears that the dam has been breached, and now there is water flowing out of the Dnieper reservoir near Kiev and flowing downwards on this river. I'm going to make a lot of assumptions off of this, and hopefully they're well-founded. So here's what I'm thinking. There's a Ukrainian counteroffensive. As far as I really know, the front line is not shaped like this on a lot of maps. It's actually following the Irpin River. So, I think you're starting to see where I'm going with this. They have destroyed this dam and have flooded this area, so that way they can halt the Ukrainian counteroffensive. That's nothing more than my opinion, but this is something that the Germans did in World War II to make sure that the American advances through France wouldn't be as swift. They would breach dams, or they would flood areas with reservoir water, so that way the Americans wouldn't have an easy time. They did that on D-Day to a huge extent, kind of around the southern areas around the Normandy beaches. They flooded everything, and so when these paratroopers were dropped, in the behind the lines on D-Day, they just pretty much fell into this giant lake that they had created, and they started to drown. A lot of them did. But you can see that this is something that's now being repeated in the modern day, and that's telling you that the Ukrainians must be making ground, or otherwise they wouldn't have flooded the Irpin River like we see here in this picture. So, but then again, that's nothing but my opinion, and that's kind of based off of the facts and information that we've been getting out of Ukraine for multiple weeks at this point. So it may not be true. It may just be that a stray bomb hit that dam and now it's caused a breach. Either way, even if that's the case, then we have to think about the amount of Russian logistics that may have been disrupted by this flooding, because now they're not going to be able to easily fjord something that looks like it's about a mile or 2 miles wide in some areas. So nonetheless, it's very interesting to think about. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. I'm not really wanting to dive too deep into it, but interesting nonetheless that occurred just days into the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And also, along with the dug-in positions we saw on satellite images, I'm getting the picture now that the Russians are in a very bad position here in the north, and that nothing is going well, and now they're in a very precarious position to just be pushed back a large amount, all the way, like miles back, apparently, in their minds, and that's why they're starting to dig in with static positions, and that's why they may have breached this dam and flooded a large area, so that way the Ukrainians wouldn't have as easy a time pushing the Russians back. So now we're going to move on to the next bit of news. We can see that a Ka-52 was once again down near Kiev. This one here. I'm not sure. Actually, I'm going to be honest with you, because I was just looking at this. This kind of looks like one of the exact same Ka-52s that were downed near Mykolaiv, and that didn't click in my head. No, I'm sorry, Kharkiv. That didn't click in my head until now, because there's snowfall on this helicopter, and there's no snow near Kiev right now. So I don't think that this was taken recently or now. So I'm going to have to actually discredit this one as a misreport. I think that Ka-52 was actually shot down in another place, because I vividly remember that camouflage scheme and that snowfall on another Ka-52 down near Kharkiv many days ago. So unfortunately, I don't think that one was entirely true. We're going to forget that one then, and now we're going to move on to the city of Kiev, where last night we saw Shilkas firing over the city. It shows that the Ukrainian air defenses are still active, operational, and apparently deterring Russian aircraft. You can see in the distance, although the camera's trying to focus, the shells from the Shilka flying into the air and exploding. Hopefully taking something with it in the future. So, we've covered all the news in Kiev. Kiev has been relatively quiet, although counteroffensives have been occurring. The reason why I believe it's getting quiet is because the Ukrainians aren't wanting to publicize how successful the counterattacks have been at the moment. Usually, if we get a lot of video footage, it's usually because they're trying to report Russian locations and such, but tonight it appears that that's not the case. And also, along with other nights, that appears to not be the case in Kiev, which is leading me to make the assumption, and once again, this is entirely an assumption, in my opinion, based off of what I've seen and the facts that I've gathered, that the Ukrainians are pushing, and so the Russians aren't taking a lot of videos or footage because it wouldn't be good for them, and the Ukrainians aren't taking a lot of pictures or footage because it wouldn't be good for them either. So this may be suggesting that the Russians are being pushed back to a great deal, and as a matter of fact, considering that this dam has been breached and this area has been flooded now, I'm going to do this on stream, just so that way we can have a good moment. We can assume that the Ukrainians have probably pushed all the way up to that river if they did that, so that way the Russians could ensure that they wouldn't cross. So we are going to adjust the front line to account for this change. About right there. There we go. Now we'll save that. And we'll say that the front lines look something like that, which is much better than what we've been seeing over the past week. So that being said, we've covered everything in Kiev. We're now going to move up to the area of Chernihiv, where we can see a little bit of news today, and we can see a little boy, a little dog, a good boy, searching for bombs. And apparently he's found a load of them, 90 explosive objects, according to this tweet. I'm going to show you all this dog. It's a sweet little dog, and it's doing an incredibly good job. It's got its own vest and everything. Okay, I have to pause this for a second because I know that there's a lot going on in this war, but I do like to say that for some reason this little dog reminds me of my own. I actually have 2 little corgis, and they're so precious. I love corgis, and if you ever get a corgi, you'll understand why people just love them so much. But this little dog reminds me a lot of a corgi, and it's crazy to think that, according to the tweet, found 90 bombs. It's just really cool. And I also have a big thing for dogs. I love dogs. And that one's certainly a very good dog. So that's the end of that video. It's just good to see the little dog at work, knowing that it's doing an incredibly good job searching the area of Chernihiv for unexploded ordnance. I'd also like to say and make a mention that Chernihiv has been relatively quiet for a long time now. It may be suggesting that the Russians have stalled in this area, and we've also not seen a lot of reports anymore of any kind of artillery barrages or attacks on the city, which may suggest that they're not even able to supply the artillery units or the aircraft that were previously bombarding and damaging the city. Once again, that's entirely my opinion based off of the video evidence that we've been finding, and since there's been a lack of it for so long, one can only assume that the activity in the Chernihiv area has decreased drastically from the opening week of the war, and we'll just have to see if that remains true, because it's been generally proven at this point, if there's a lack of video footage coming out of an area, there's not a lot happening in it, and the amount of videos coming out are relative to the amount of activity happening in a single area. So hopefully that holds up to be true still, because that will give us a better grasp of what's going on in this northern theater. We can see it kind of seems like it's falling apart. So that being said, we're going to now move on to the locations unknown and the eastern fronts, but before we do, I'm going to answer some questions from the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so first up tonight, we have a question from Janice Harwell with a donation of $20. They say, "Are you following the Institute of War assessments of the Ukraine war? They just assessed that the Russians' first campaign has culminated because they are digging in instead of moving forward."
I have not actually. I usually just base my knowledge off of what I know from history. I don't really try and cross-check it with other sources, because I'm afraid if I do that, I could kind of contaminate my own thinking and school of logic with other sources, and then my content won't be original anymore. I'll just be parroting what other people say. So I haven't actually looked at the Institute of War. I haven't really looked at anyone else's information. And I do like to confide with my moderators, because a lot of them are military veterans, and get an idea of what they're thinking of it. But as far as with other people, not quite. And so with the Institute of War, I have not. But one thing I could say about their assessment that the campaign has culminated and now the Russians are preparing a defense is that that might be true. I mean, like we're seeing the Russians prepare for defenses. That's for sure. But to say it's culminated, I'm not really sure. But I hope that's answered your question. And I thank you very much for the support. So also, I'd like everyone to know in the future, just going on from here, I don't really try and read what other people say because I see a lot of people have done that on YouTube and also on the news, and they all start repeating the same stuff, and it's not really original. And it's like it's the easy way out. I sit here and try and make sure that I can find all these videos by myself, but I have a group of mods now, like Paul. Paul was on here asking questions one night, and he helps me a lot, along with Fair, who's another moderator, in gathering up these points during the day. But I want to make sure that we are able to compile our own evidence and represent our own story that we've seen coming out of the front today, based off of all the data and information we've gathered, and then present that information in a way that makes sense historically. So I don't really cross-reference that a lot. So if anyone has a question about that, the answer is that I'm trying to use historical basis and knowledge instead of like what the mainstream ideas are to try and gather this up. And that's why, not to go on too long, but that's why my stream is a lot different than others. Because if you look at other channels, I can almost quote sometimes the news article they've read their information off of, because they're almost reading it word for word and just restating it in video form. But I do not do that. I actually watch mainstream news hardly at all. So if you asked me what they said on CNN or Fox today, all I could tell you is that they're misrepresenting the news, because I watched enough of it to know that they're stretching the truth and playing with wordage that they're saying, so that way they can get higher viewership. So that being said, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, next up is a comment from Matt Ritchie. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. He leaves a donation of $20. He says, new to your stream, I watched your episodes last evening and it was very informative. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the support. I'm glad for the support in both ways. Like saying that you love the channel and also giving us a super chat, because that's the only way we really keep this channel running, is through the super chats. And so we're trying to make sure that we have enough income to make sure to put a decent amount of it back into this channel and keep it growing and have a budget for videos in the future. So thank you very much once again for the support. It helps us out. And also, if you like the content, I'm also going to say this again, because I want this to be hyped up as much as possible. We will be running another fundraiser tonight. So tell your friends, tell everyone you know to hop on and chip in a couple of dollars. And a couple of dollars goes a long way, as we saw last time, because we raised $29.1 thousand for the American Red Cross. And now we can do it again for the next organization, which I'll announce tomorrow night, because it's an incredibly good one, and I hope you all like it a lot. So once again, thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next donation is from Missy with a donation of $20. She says, for the mods to do a great job. And thank you very much, Missy. We appreciate the compliment.
Thank you very much for complimenting my mods. I know they love it a lot. They do an incredible amount of work. And so if y'all support them, it means a lot to me as well, because I respect what they do. They help me out a lot, and they don't ask for anything in return but for us to continue and run these streams and make sure that this news gets out. So I thank you very much once again. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and next up is a question from Ralph. He puts in a donation of $20. He says, recent viewer enjoying the channel, so keep up the good work.
Thank you very much for the support. I'm glad that I'm seeing a lot of new viewers tonight. And if y'all like the news I covered in the Northern Front, and it will resume here soon with the location unknowns in the Eastern Front, make sure to like this video. Like subscribing, if you like it, subscribe or whatever, if you want to. But liking it helps this news get out to more people. And so the more likes we get per percentage of viewers, the more this is spread out and the more people can get this kind of news. So if you like it, make sure to, if you like the content, make sure to like the video, because it helps us out in reaching out to more people and giving them more accurate news as to what's happened today. But once again, thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next question is from Rodnov Claw. He puts in a donation of $15. He says, I love your work. Any news on what happened to each of the dispersed groups of the 40-mile convoy? Mainstream media keeps reporting on logistics issues, but shouldn't the Russians have been resupplied by now is his question.
So in a war, there's really not like a scheduled resupply date. It's just that whenever units need resupply, convoys are sent their direction to resupply them. And then sometimes that doesn't work even in the American military, because we actually have a guy, a moderator called Paul, and he actually told me a story about how in Syria they were eating like a cereal spoon worth of rice and chicken a day because they were having a hard time delivering supplies in terms of food to them. But getting beyond that, the convoy was mostly logistics, as far as we know, but it appears that they all stopped, and then they spread out into the tree lines around the road, and then the remaining 17 miles of it turned around and drove back into Belarus, and we don't really know where that went. We think that they were redistributed around the entirety of Ukraine, or they may have just returned and are being camped out in Belarus at the moment because they just don't have the logistical ability to run all of these vehicles at the same time. We don't really know what happened to them, but I'm leaning more towards they were redistributed around the front lines to try and put the forces where they'll be used best and where there's a better supply chain occurring. So as far as the 40-mile convoy goes, that's really like the end goal and end result of that information. And I'd also like to point out once again that it was like, if you want to go back and watch the streams when that convoy was actually on that road, I think, because I don't want to go on for too long, because the 40-mile long convoy thing was huge, and I talked about it for probably like collectively hours amongst all the streams, so I'm not going to go over it again, but there's a lot of information about it, so make sure to go check out my previous streams, and it'll give you a really good idea of what I was thinking about the 40-mile long convoy. And then there's a whole bunch of people on YouTube who were thinking differently, but go check them out, because it's always good to get a variety of opinions and see what you think makes the best sense. But once again, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to 2 more questions, and then we're going to start covering the location unknowns in the Eastern Front.
All right, and next up is a comment from Potato Chips with a donation of $14. He says, I love your show and keeping it real. Do you think Ukraine will try to take back Mariupol and South End if the Russians gain full control?
I think that if they lose it, because although Ukraine is mounting counterattacks, they aren't like so wildly successful that retaking Mariupol would be in the grand picture of things. But we never know. I mean, like, maybe the Ukrainians would get so much momentum with this counteroffensive that the Russians would be almost in a continuous route, and they would just continue pushing them back through the country. So I think, because we really don't know how long Mariupol will hold. It was about 5 days ago that I said the city would hold for probably another 48 hours, and it's 5 days later and they're still holding. Although it seems like their situation is truly getting precarious now, but we'll just have to see in the coming days if that's still the case. But I'm not really sure if they would try and retake Mariupol. I believe that they would just count that as a loss, because after they lose it, the strategic value of it will be lost to a point, because the landing forces that are in the Azov Sea will use the port of Mariupol to drop off troops, maybe create a supply head here in Mariupol that can be supplied by ship, maybe lessening the concerns of their logistics chains. And so the only thing they'd be doing by trying to retake Mariupol is directly control the port that the logistics chain is in, or the logistics depot or the fob or whatever you like to call it will be. They could probably do that with drones instead, probably keep on damaging it to that point. But then again, if they capture that land, it would deny the Russians access to the port until they retook it by with infantry on the ground or another naval invasion. So we'll just have to see. Honestly, I'm not really sure what's going to happen to Mariupol if it falls. I don't know what the Ukrainians plan on doing if that happens. But nonetheless, they've held for an incredibly long amount of time, and I think at this point, they've done their service to the war in defending the city long enough to tie up enough resources for the rest of Ukraine. So that being said, I hope I answered the question well enough, and so we're going to move on to the last question.
All right, and the next question is from Gina Gaynor. She leaves a donation of $20. She asks, do you think Russia would dare use a bioweapon in Kiev to save Capitol buildings but kill politicians? The talk about them using them hasn't stopped, and it concerns me. Thank you for your long hours and hard work.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And to answer that question, I'm not entirely sure if they would or would not. We currently did get evidence today that a TOS-1 was being used heavily, and I will get to that video in a bit. It's in the location unknowns. So considering that they're using a TOS-1, which is already pretty much a war crime, in using it, it could be possible that they'd use chemical weapons. But usually, countries that are authoritarian only use chemical weapons inside their borders, because it's really hard to get that kind of information. It's hard for other nations around the world to get that information if it was being used internally within your country. But if it was being used in Ukraine, there would be raw evidence of that occurring, and that would be something that the world would probably view as extremely egregious. Although, then again, thermobaric weapons are pretty egregious as well, but we don't see anyone doing anything about that either. But honestly, in my opinion, I just don't see it happening. The United States had the same fears in Iraq when we invaded in 2003, and we thought that the Iraqis were going to start using chemical weapons on the Americans, and they didn't. So that may be the same case here, but you never know until this war is over. And they may use them or they may not. So that's kind of my opinion on it. But I thank you once again very much for the support. And that being said, we've rounded up the first group of questions in between the northern and eastern fronts, and so now excuse me, I just butchered that. So now we're going to move on to the Eastern Front with the location unknowns and the one bit of news we've gotten in Kharkiv today, which will probably please a lot of y'all who've been asking a very similar question from what I've been getting from my mods. So we're going to move on to the first bit of location unknown news, and we can see here that Ukrainian grads were at work. It's always good to know that the Ukrainians are never giving the Russians a break. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news, and here's the TOS 1 I was talking about. A lot of people for weeks now have been begging me to find videos of TOS 1s being used, and I've been telling them for weeks, I'm sorry, but I haven't found anything, but as soon as I do, it's going to be on the stream. And so here I am, and I'm delivering on that promise. We finally have footage of a TOS 1 actually being used. So I'm going to show you all that right here, and 1 second, let me put it on full screen. I'm going to show this to y'all, and y'all do have to remember that thermobaric weapons are a special breed of cruelty. So just remember that when you're thinking about some of the Russians are good people, remember that they're actually using this thing, which is the embodiment of a war crime in Ukraine. Without further ado, here's the video. What's also interesting to me, I don't really know how the fire started in front of the tank. I think it was from like the rockets leaving the launcher, and apparently they caught some dry material on fire really easily, which was very odd. But nonetheless, you can see that a TOS 1 is being used in Ukraine, and of course we can assume that if it's hitting anywhere populated, it's turning the internal organs of the people in that area into mush. Literally, it's a very inhumane way to kill people, and that's why it was banned. And it's banned and it's a war crime. And so that being said, I hope that infuriates y'all a little bit extra about the Russians, because it's clear at this point. No one can really sympathize with the Russians and explain away the things they're doing, because that would be like America, after Vietnam when napalm was banned in warfare, going to, well, I believe it was, if I'm correct, but going to Iraq and dropping napalm in the middle of Baghdad. It would be something similar to that, just burning people alive, or some similar situation to that. So I just want y'all to think about that next time y'all think about the Russian army. It doesn't appear like they're a group of innocent people who are following the orders of a madman. It appears that they're a group of mad people following a madman. So now we're going to move on to the next bit of video today, which unfortunately will have to be muted because it has copyrighted music in it. Let me make sure I mute that just to make sure. And so this is a Ukrainian soldier with a group of them firing a javelin at a Russian armored vehicle. So I'm just going to show you the video. He's lining up the shot for the first few seconds of the video. I know Paul probably knows exactly what he's doing because he's used these before. Unfortunately, I do not have the liberty of that experience, but nonetheless, it appears that he's probably trying to input everything into the CLU. He'll then launch the rocket soon. Right about now. The rocket then flies off into the distance towards the vehicle and hits it. You know what's funny to me? I don't know if the Russians are incompetent or what, but these guys were standing in the field like it was an episode of Seinfeld, and they were just sitting around and having a little conversation about what's going on. And the Russians just didn't see them lining up this javelin. I'm sure that they were probably in an actual firefight if the audio wasn't copyrighted and we could actually hear the normal ambience of what was going on. But nonetheless, kind of makes me feel like the Russians are incompetent that they were at that close of a range, and the Russians still didn't know that there was just a group of Ukrainians just standing over them watching their soon-to-be demise. But nonetheless, we're going to move on to the next bit of news, and we can see here that the Kiev Independent has once again published today's casualty reports. We can see that the Russians, according to the Kiev Independent, have lost 14,400 troops, 95 planes, 115 helicopters, 466 tanks, 213 artillery pieces, nearly 1,500 APCs, 72 MLRSs, 3 ships, that's up by 1. I don't know what boat has been sunk, but nonetheless, they've had another one sunk. 914 vehicles, which, according to what we know, would be about a quarter of the logistical vehicles that they originally entered the country with. 60 fuel trucks. We don't know how many fuel trucks they have specifically. 17 drones, 44 anti-aircraft warfare vehicles, and 11 special equipment. So I'm guessing the special equipment is like bridge layers and cranes and such things like that. And I also want to give y'all a comparison because this is week 3 of the war in Ukraine, and we're getting close to kind of... Actually, this is week 4. I'm sorry, correction. This is week 4 of the Ukraine war. But I'm going to give y'all a little bit of an idea of how well the U.S. Did in the invasion of Iraq, to give y'all an idea, a better idea, of how poorly the Russians are doing at this point. So the American invasion force was of course much larger, but also the Iraqi forces were much larger as well. They have 424,000 active troops, along with 650,000 reserves. So we can, I know that we're going to say that they're worse trained, which, I mean, like, that's kind of, I can see that. But the thing, though, is that they, much like the Russians, were almost on par in terms of just size to the Iraqis, which is kind of what the Russians did as well. They had an invasion force of around 220,000 soldiers, and they were facing off against 175,000 Ukrainian ground forces. So they did outnumber them almost in the similar ratio that the Americans outnumbered the Iraqis, and then if you add in the coalition troops, it's a little bit more. But we're going to go down here, and let's look at the casualties. 196 killed. And this invasion lasted a month and a week. So we are getting close. We're just a few days off from it being the 1 month mark. And so over 1 month and 1 week, the United States lost 196 soldiers. The Russians have lost 14,400 according to the Kiev Independent. We can't really verify these numbers, but that's what we're going with for now. On the about the 3.5 week. So let's do the math. The United States, if we were to take that number, 14,400 troops killed in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we were to divide that by the amount of American soldiers killed during the entire invasion of Iraq, we can see that for every American soldier that was killed in the invasion of Iraq, 73 Russian soldiers have been killed in the invasion of Ukraine. And so far, because on about the 3rd week, I checked this today as well to make sure that I'd be saying something mostly true. About around the 3rd week of the war, the United States controlled nearly all of Iraq except for Baghdad and the areas surrounding Baghdad. But they controlled the entirety of the country. And if we scroll back out, and I just want y'all to look at this again because this is hilarious. Although Ukraine, I believe, is a bigger country than Iraq, of course it probably is, they hardly have taken over an area that would be similar to the amount of land Iraq has. Let's pull that up. How big is Iraq? 169,000 square miles. How big is Ukraine? And I do know about the Mercator projection, but actually, Ukraine is larger, but it's not as large as I actually thought, which is interesting. But nonetheless, it's just a little bit larger. And so the Russians, if we're going off of, how well the U.S. did in Iraq, the Russians should be, like, really at Zhytomyr and captured everything to the east of Zhytomyr and moving through the country at about that speed. But we don't see that. They've been stalled. And so no one can tell me that the Russians are doing good because a lot of people are starting to try and push the thing that all this is going according to plan. If you've been here since day one, you know that nothing has gone to plan. You can just take a million examples. I'm not going to go over them, but nothing has gone to plan. So now we're going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, which is that we've seen more Ukrainian Tochka cruise missile launchers in action. I'm going to show this right here. Fortunately, it has no audio, but we can see that they are raising the Tochkas for firing, and then they will launch them very soon. We don't really know exactly where this was. They're assuming that this was in the southern front, but that wasn't entirely like sure. Like no one said that with certainty, so this was put under the location unknown tab. So as you can see, the first Tochka is away, and now the second Tochka is away, hopefully to destroy as much Russian units or equipment as possible. It's always good to see. It's wonderful to see the Ukrainians are not out of the fight. We can also see in this next bit of news that farmers were delivering milk. The farmers are holding this country together. They are stealing equipment, and yet, amongst all that, they are still able to go to the towns and deliver their produce. As we can see in this video here, they just have a trailer full of milk. I forgot what these things are called. They're not called milk jugs. What are they called? Milk. Man, I would remember the name of that certain kind of container. I just don't know it right now. I'm sorry, y'all. But anyways, they're uploading the milk to this town up this little kind of like pulley system. And it's just good to know that the Ukrainian farmers are continuously trying to help out the rest of the people in the country by making sure that they're not short on food or anything else. So now we're going to move on to the next bit of news that we've gotten, and we can see that another Russian tank has been destroyed. We know that hundreds of them have been destroyed, but it's always good to see a video like this, so I'm going to let y'all watch this.
Yeah, man!
It's always good to see, and I'm so glad that they always celebrate every single time, because they have all the right to celebrate. A lot of people say, oh, you know, what about the taking of lives? Yeah, imagine you're one of those guys, and that your village was bombed where your family was, and your family could have been one of the ones who've been killed. But you don't know yet, because the whole entire country's like that, and so they don't have time to get in touch with everyone and say, hey, your family was killed in that village. They probably don't. And so I bet you they are glad and more than cheerful to destroy as many Russian vehicles and soldiers as possible. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news, and we can see a compilation here of clips from TDFs, the Ukrainian Volunteer Corps. I believe that these are kind of like TDFs, or, you know, the Foreign Legion. I couldn't really tell because I haven't heard anything called the Volunteer Corps. I mean, like, are those Ukrainian volunteers or foreign volunteers? Don't really know. But we see here that they're firing artillery in this clip. The artillery is landing on Russian positions. We can see some burning T-72s. I'm not sure if this was all taken in the same area, because we saw what looked like a depot, and now we're seeing a village. So I'm not really sure if those were in kind of like the same location being hit by the same fire. But nonetheless, great stuff to see. It's really good to see that it appears that the volunteer groups like the TDFs and the Foreign Legion are being well equipped to a point. And I would like to also say one important thing is that there is a video, and people are probably going to rebut what I'm saying here with a video of a guy who claims he was in the Foreign Legion, and let me make sure I get his voice right. Not to mock him or anything, but I saw a bunch of Americans get killed, and it was terrible, and so I went back and I tried to leave. And like, this guy is going around everywhere, and they pretty much proved that this guy wasn't there. He was kind of like the version of someone else that we had on this channel, I suppose, because they found out that his story isn't adding up. And on top of that, what did he expect? Like, it's war. People are going to die. People on your side will die. And I don't understand why he's thinking that he was going to go over there and everyone around him was going to be safe. He's not the main character in a movie. This is real life. This is war. People will die in a war, even on your own side. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news, now that I've kind of covered that. We're going to move on to the next bit of news. We can see more Ukrainian grads launching rockets, this time at night. So I'm going to let y'all watch the video. As you can see, it's just the usual grad rocket launching. Nothing really special about this. It's just a normal. It's pretty much run of the mill. There's really nothing for me to add to this. It's just a video of the Grats firing. So we're going to now move on to the next bit of news. We don't really have much to add to that. It's just a video. We can see that Georgian volunteers, which we've seen a decent amount of, are in combat in this village. I'm going to show you all the video. Unfortunately, it has no audio. But we can see that the village has been decently destroyed, and it appears that the Georgian volunteers have the support of a BMP-2, which is interesting. Hopefully they're doing an incredibly good job. This guy kind of looks a little scared, but who's not scared in war? War is a terrible, scary thing for everyone involved, so I'm sure he'll return home, although he's scared now. He'll return home and he'll be very proud of what he did volunteering to help the Ukrainian cause. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, and we can see this priest training with a trainer RPG. I'm going to show you all this real quick. Someone tried to say that he was fighting for the armed forces of Ukraine, but this is more like training him how to use an RPG, because this is actually the training, kind of like the training head of the warhead. I'm the training rocket. We'll call it the training rocket, and it shoots like a little 22 bullet out of the front of it or something like that, I believe. But nonetheless, they're just training him. But anyways, it's just interesting to see that a priest is doing this out of all people. Just very interesting. But anyways, you can just see that he's training on it. Nothing really much more to add. It was a very interesting video, though. And so we're now going to move on to a video of another Russian base that was hit. I'm going to show all this here real quick, if it loads. May take a minute to load. Here we go. Alright, so I'm going to click on this video here. You can see here that they're just watching the video. I don't know if this was live, but you can see that they're about to start hitting this base very soon. And boom, they start hitting it all over. And we know that the damage will probably be pretty significant, pretty decent. Very happy to know that they're not giving the Russians any easier of a time logistically. We know that the Ukrainians' primary focus, and it was heavily stated at the beginning of the war, was to target Russian logistics, and it appears that they're not only trying to encourage civilian-led initiatives to do that, but the army is also following through on that as well. And as y'all all know, I believe that logistics are the way to win a war. It's not about the soldiers and how hard of a fighter they are. It's not about the tanks and how good they are. It's about how much you can supply them and how effectively they can be fielded due to the amount of supplies they're given. That's all that matters to me, really. Although there are other factors. Of course, I can't act like that's the only thing you need, because if you can supply everyone with pikes and the enemy infantry has AK-74s, obviously the people with pikes will lose, but you get what I'm saying for the most part, hopefully. And now we can see here that the Ukrainians launched a near miss on this DPR tank. The shell went right over it. So I'm going to show you all this. It's an incredible video. They were so close to ending up like that one group of tankers we saw in Mariupol. Right about now. Right there. Ooh. We're so close. I think that crew probably had a clincher moment right there, and I hope that they didn't get to think about it too long and another one hit them. So now we're going to move on through this front area, and I'm going to explain this for a minute once again, and it's not really like explaining, it's really just recapping. This line here in maroon is not a Russian front, it is a Russian breakthrough area. We haven't got enough video footage or evidence in this area to say that there is a Russian presence here. If you have been on, and I'm saying that because some people will probably say, hey man, your map's not accurate, because according to CNN, Fox, and a couple of others, they've made it all the way to Novobossan. But the thing is that we haven't got any video footage to back that up. And the only video footage we've seen out of this area was 2 videos showing 2 destroyed Russian convoys outside of Perluki. And so this area stays maroon because we don't have confirmed heavy presence of Russian soldiers here. It looks like it may have been a couple of breakthrough convoys trying to head to Kiev with almost no support. But that was not the case here at Troishtinets. We kept on getting enough footage of Russian forces moving down the H-12 towards Okturka that we actually changed this front line from maroon to red to represent that the Russians apparently have taken this amount of land. Also, we've heard that there's been no fighting in Sumy. We haven't gotten any video evidence over the past few days for the most part to show that there's a heavy amount of fighting there. So apparently the Russians aren't pushing Sumy as hard as they have been. Maybe the fronts have changed around here and they've decided to try and bypass Sumy and head towards Okturka. I'm not really sure. We don't have enough video evidence to really draw a picture or get an idea of what's going on around there. So all we know is that Sumy has not fallen, and the Russians appear to have made it to Troyestinets at this point. We're now going to move on down to the last area of the front, the Eastern Front in particular, of Kharkiv, and we haven't heard any news from here today either. And what is wild is that there's never been a day where we haven't heard anything out of, like, Kharkiv city. And considering that it has a population of 1.4 million people, 1.8 million people, I believe, somewhere within that range, although most of them have left by now, it's very interesting to see that we have no evidence of anything happening in Kharkiv, which may suggest that the Russian attack has stalled here. Maybe they're out of supplies and nothing has happened today. Because video evidence is suggestive. I have to say this again, it's always suggestive of action. Whenever we see anything huge going on, like when the Russians entered Kiev and made it to the Kiev Zoo, there were videos by the dozens of different angles, different views of all this stuff happening in Kiev. And it was very suggestive that there was a large amount of Russian presence and fighting here in Kiev. When they got pushed back to Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin, and there was heavy fighting there, we got a lot of video evidence. Now, we're not getting any video evidence from Kharkiv, which suggests that nothing's happening here. But we did get one thing that was in the Kharkiv area, and this may bring a lot of joy to some of you, because I've been hearing from the mods that there has been a lot of questions of, have the Ukrainians destroyed the railheads? Have the Ukrainians destroyed railway bridges? And such things like that. And the answer is yes. We've gotten a video today showing that the Ukrainians destroyed a railway bridge. And I'm going to show you all that real quick. Oh, it's got copyrighted music, of course. And we're just going to run it. So you can see here, there's a railway bridge. I think that bridge is incredibly short, and so destroying it is good, but it's not going to be as much of a delay as destroying, say, like a quarter-mile long bridge or a half-mile long bridge. But nonetheless, that's not to negate the effectiveness of destroying any kind of bridge, because it will take a much longer amount of time to rebuild a bridge than just relaying track on level ground. One thing that I haven't seen the Ukrainians do, which may be really helpful, is going, well, I think they use concrete ties now, but back in the day, it used to be a common thing to add a plow attachment to the back of a locomotive and just start pulling that plow kind of like thing. I guess you could just call it a large, like, hatchet blade or something, and they would attach it to the middle of the rear of the train and just start moving forward really slowly, and as they did, it would tear apart all the railway ties and split the railroad, where the entire thing would be unusable. I don't really think they want to inflict that kind of damage on the railroads, though, because they'll have to start using them immediately after the war is over. But nonetheless, we can see here that that bridge was entirely destroyed. That will hinder the Russian efforts a little bit, because they'll have to clear that out and replace it with a different one. Also, one more thing. This point is critically important. The Russians operate on a different rail gauge than the Ukrainians, I believe. Let me check that out just to make sure. Railroad gauges. I was told they did, and I think that that is true. So the Russians and the Ukrainians, actually, according to this map, they use the same railroad gauge. I believe that it is the... Let me make sure. Maybe... Okay, we have green. It's dark green, so apparently, I believe it's 5-foot gauge. Or regardless, the point is that they could probably use those railroad tracks with ease. Unlike, though, now this would be something, if they invaded NATO, the railroad transport brigades would be entirely useless, because they would have to actually operate on an entirely different gauge of railroad tracks, and the Russians don't have any trains that run on standard gauge, which is what the United States, really all of North America and Europe operates off of, and so they wouldn't be able to use any of the railroads in Europe. They would just have to literally rebuild them entirely to 5-foot gauge, or 1520 millimeter gauge. So that is actually interesting to know, because I didn't know that myself. I was actually told the other day that the Russians used an entirely different gauge of railroad, which I believed enough to actually say it on stream, but I was kind of skeptical about it, because I was thinking, what are the odds that a former Soviet state would not be using the same railroad gauge as Russia? But nonetheless, we can see now that that actually is true. They both use the same railroad gauges. So, now that we've covered all the news of the Eastern Front, which went by really quickly today, which is good news, it means not a lot's happened around here, we're now going to start moving on to the Southern Front the rest of the country and the international news we've gotten. But before we do, I'm going to answer some questions from the chat. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so we've been getting quite a few really good questions from the chat. So the first one up is from King Alexander. He puts in a donation of $50 A. He says, "Hey, Enforcer, did you think the Russian army is getting exposed? And do you think that China is second guessing on invading Taiwan? I love your channel."
Thank you very much for the support. It's always very important to me, and it also helps us run the channel. So thank you very much for the super chat. And the answer is yes, I do think the Russian army, the Russian military, is being exposed as incompetent for the large part. I have seen some YouTube channels try and, I guess, explain it away that this is actually all part of the Russian plan. But tell me when a country's plan is to get billions of dollars of their equipment destroyed over the course of several weeks and get tens of thousands of soldiers killed just because that's how they would do it. I mean, a lot of people believe in the enemy of the gates kind of trope about the Russians, that they just throw human waves at stuff, but that's not how the modern world works, and that's not how Russian doctrine works from as far as we know, because it's almost public how their doctrine works. It's very similar to Western doctrine in a decent amount of ways because they've been trying to modernize. So they're not supposed to be taking heavy casualties, but we can see they clearly are. So, with that being said, I do think they're being exposed because they've had loads of their best equipment destroyed. They've had thousands of infantry killed, tens of thousands at this point killed, and it's showing that the Russian army isn't what they've made it out to be. It's very incompetent, it's incredibly inefficient, poorly trained, and very little supplied. And so I hope I answered that question pretty well, because I think entirely it's been exposed. And to move on to the next part of it, the Chinese are second guessing their stance because they said in the Olympics, when Xi met with Putin, they said, we have a special relationship, Russia and us. We're going to stick it out with each other till the end. And then Russia did this and just started to suffer. And then they asked the Chinese, which said that the Russian military was greatly weakened and they needed military support from the outside to keep going. They said, China, could you please send us stuff? And the Chinese said no. And so I think that the Chinese are rethinking their entire stance because if the Russian invasion of Ukraine had been successful, I believe the Chinese would have started eyeballing an invasion of Taiwan within the next year. Well, at least up till the next year, like it would have happened in between now and a year from now. I believe that would have been what happened. But now they see how badly this has gone for Russia, how bad the economic sanctions are, and for China that has to carefully weigh out their decisions based off of the economics because their country relies heavily on exports, and that's how their economy grows mostly, is through international exports. If they did something like this, this would irreparably destroy the Chinese economy for a decade at least, or longer. And so they can't really make that kind of risk and move like the Russians have because they have a lot at stake. So, yes, I do believe that the Chinese are probably going to be a lot more reluctant about their talk on Taiwan, and they may not even invade the country. But we'll have to see as time goes on if they're actually going to dedicate themselves to that. We know that Xi called the President of the United States the other day. I didn't really look into that phone call too much because that's kind of like background noise to the Ukraine war. But apparently it didn't go incredibly well, but we don't see the Chinese doing anything directly to support the Russians still. So I thank you very much for the question. I hope I answered both parts of them pretty well in my opinion on them. Once again, I do have to say this. What I say is not definitively the truth and nothing but that truth. It is mostly my opinion and what I know off of the situation. And so I just want everyone to know once again that while I do thank y'all for asking the questions, don't take everything I say for granted and quote me on it, because sometimes I may actually be wrong, and I will be honest enough with myself to say that everything I do say is not always right. Sometimes there are flaws in what I say. So that being said, I thank you very much for the support once again. I hope I answered that question very well and you got something out of it. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and next up is a question from Epic Alien. He puts in a donation of $20. He says, your format is the best. And my question is, I heard that you infer that the best the Ukrainians can get out of this conflict is a ceasefire. Why won't the Ukrainians aim to take Donetsk, Luhansk, and the Crimea completely back?
Well, the main reason I say, and it's not really a ceasefire, it's more like I actually put up a poll on this on the community page of my YouTube channel today. Go check that out and vote on it if you'd like, if you haven't already. But what I think, I'm actually voting on the second best option, in my opinion, and that's that the Ukrainians agree to a peace treaty where they declare their neutrality. I think that's the best thing that's going to happen in Ukraine because the Russians are never going to allow them to join NATO. Strategically, that would put them at a severe disadvantage, and so they will keep this war going and dedicate however many resources they need, even if it seriously hinders or cripples their country, if they know that Ukraine's goal is to join NATO in the end. So Ukraine will, I believe, have to compromise in the end to get some kind of peace agreement where they just declare their neutrality, where they won't join either side, and so NATO's front line won't change and Russia's front line won't change either. So that way they can get out of this war a lot quicker if they agree to that. And also, on top of that, the Ukrainians, while they do appear to be doing well and they're holding them back and pushing them back in some places, the Ukrainians aren't in the position to start, I believe, at least in my opinion, to start invading Donetsk and Luhansk and Crimea and retake those lands. I don't think that's something they'd be able to do because you do have to remember, once again, while they're faring fairly well, war fatigue is a thing, and I don't believe that they'd be willing to pursue kind of like retaking Luhansk, Donetsk, and Crimea because it would just be such an undertaking and it would stretch out this war so much longer than it already is. So I'm not really sure. Then again, that's entirely my opinion. They may actually be eyeballing that if the war starts going incredibly well, but we'll just have to see as time goes on. But once again, I thank you very much for the question and the support. It means a lot to the channel. And so that being said, we're moving on to the next question.
And next question is from Sir Caps. He puts in a donation of $20. We do appreciate the support. He says, I love the channel. I can't get a breakdown of events like this anywhere else.
Well, thank you very much for the support. We're getting a load of support tonight through our super chats, and I gotta say, I'm thankful so much that y'all are all a fan of the way I report the news. I was actually, I'm I don't like to draw in too much and like try and like bash other stuff because the people who run it, everyone in the world, it tries to be well intentioned as much as possible. That's generally a truth. There's no one in the world that's true. Well, very few people in the world that are trying to be inherently evil or misleading or do things to the detriment of others. For the most part, that's my opinion. But I watched CNN and Fox today. I watched both of them for a short amount of time because I can only take mainstream news in moderation. And I just gotta say, I mean, like, they're just off base on everything. They simplify everything. They kind of like play with the words. Like, they keep on playing with the wordage about the cruise missile attacks at Yavoriv and Lviv. When it happened at Yavoriv, they're like, oh, the Russians have moved within 13 miles of the border with Poland. We're close to war. And they said moved. They said the Russians have moved. They made it sound like they were pushing through Belarus and they were just a few miles away from the border. Complete mistruth. And then on top of that, it was a cruise missile attack. And so it's a complete mistruth that the Russians have moved there. They've attacked there, but they haven't got there. And now with Lviv, they're saying the same thing. This is the closest they've ever gotten. The Russians have moved 40 miles to the Polish border. That's the closest they've ever gotten. And that's a lie because they've already said last week with Yavoriv, oh, this is the closest they've gotten. They've moved here. And now they're saying the same thing about Lviv. They're saying that the Russians have moved there. And their wordage on both channels. So it's not just a one party thing or the other party thing because both of those channels are associated with different political parties. This is an overall news thing that they keep on playing with the wordage and misrepresenting things to the point that it's almost entirely untrue. And I don't really like that kind of reporting. It's generally dishonest and it's trying to fearmonger to gain views. They're trying to make people think around the country that World War III is on the horizon and the Russians are just handing it to the Ukrainians and just beating the living daylights out of them. And it's entirely untrue. So I do thank you very much for supporting how I run my channel and do the formatting. I try and keep my news as actually I don't do any clickbaiting. I just show you the video evidence and draw conclusions and references out of it. So I thank you very much for the support. I try and do the best I can to make sure that this is an unbiased and truthful depiction of what's going on in Ukraine as much as possible. And so I thank you very much for the support once again. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Richard Klein. He asks, do you think that in effect, Russia has its own no-fly zone of Ukraine and that NATO is basically obeying it?
As far as wars go, That would be true, because the Russians are trying to control the airspace over Ukraine because they are currently involved in the war. And so, in a regard, I guess you could say yes, we're kind of respecting it because the Russians, they are the one of the combatant forces in this war. It's not really like they're a neutral party trying to enforce peace or anything. They're currently actively invading the country. And so it's kind of a little bit of a different circumstance when talking about the Russians kind of making a no-fly zone of their own because it is a war, and they do have to use air assets like fighter aircraft and close air support aircraft to try and help them win this war. So yes, in a way they have, but it's not really NATO respecting it. It's more like NATO would violate it as soon as possible. But the problem is they're scared of a nuclear onslaught that'll kill hundreds of millions of people. So it's kind of a little bit of a complex issue. It's not exactly like that, but I do see where you're coming from. It's super simplified. Yes, I would agree with that. But I thank you very much for the support and the question. It's a pretty good question, and I believe that would actually be a pretty interesting thing to have people discuss in the chat because I think a lot of people have all kinds of opinions on him. I'd like the moderators to hear him at least. I can't see him sadly, but the moderators would probably love to hear him and see what everyone's thinking, and they'll tell me what everyone said after the stream. And so I thank you very much for the question. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
And the next question is from Rob Schechter. He asks, are you a techie or a programmer? I'm a pro bono lawyer and engineer making international criminal law more accessible. I can post a link to the GitHub repository if you're interested.
Unfortunately, I'm not a programmer. I actually have like almost no programming or computer experience. It took me a decent amount of time to actually figure out how to do this Google My Maps thing. It took me like a whole day. So as far as programming, no, I don't really know anything about programming. I'm sorry that I don't. I wish I kind of did. I've always wanted to do that and looked into it, but I just haven't ever had the time to really get dedicated to it. So I thank you very much for the question, but unfortunately, no. But if you'd still like to join my Discord server and shoot that over to my enforcers, which are like my core of mods that do all the dirty work and like get that stuff kind of sorted out for me, I would love if you would do that. One other thing is that I do love everyone reaching out to me personally over Discord. I love that y'all are huge fans, but I do have to say this: y'all don't understand, but I get like 100 a day. And so it's a big thing. It's a big like time sink because I want to respond to everyone. So if you respond to me, I will respond back. But it eats up a lot of time. And so if I kind of like give a very quick response, please know that I'm very busy trying to make sure that this news gets put together. And so it's not me trying to blow y'all off or anything. It's because I'm super busy. I will try and get around eventually to really getting into deep dives of questions and videos and stuff, but this takes a lot of time every day, and I'm sorry if that happens to you, but I'm trying to make sure that this news is well put together every day. So I hope y'all understand, and I'm sorry about that if that's been the case with any of y'all, because I feel really bad when I don't have time to respond to y'all, but I'll cut that short. I'm just sorry about that. And that being said, thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Jermaine Down. He says, yesterday you posted a video of Russian armor reinforcements that had an Arctic camp scheme. Do you think that they are scrambling to cannibalize units in the Russian boonies to shore up units in the country?
I believe that they may. We do know that right now they're moving units out of South Ossetia from the South Ossetian army to bring them up to Ukraine, I suppose, because we don't really see a lot of activity in South Ossetia. So I'm assuming that, yes, they may be pulling everything out of the boonies. They may be pulling their last good units out of the Siberian... I don't know what those are called. I think they have 4 of them. I think they do. There's the Siberian one, the northern one, the eastern one, and... Wait a minute, no, the Siberian one, the northern one, the southern one, and then the central one, I believe. But they're like the command zones in Russia, and I believe that they may be pulling stuff out of the Siberian command zone. If that is the correct word, please correct me in the chat if anyone knows like what I'm actually talking about, because I just don't know the wordage right now. But I believe that they may, because we do know that they've been pulling out Boneyard T-72s. We've seen a picture of one, and so they may be scrambling to get any bit of Russian armor that's still usable and up to date and actually maintained that they have left. So thank you very much for the question. I hope I answered it pretty well. And that being said, we're going to answer 2 more questions, and then we're going to move on to the Southern Front.
All right, and the next question is from DJ Palm. He says, great work. Do we have any knowledge of attacks on supply lines behind enemy lines? Do we also know how much about the rebuilt railway lines used to bring Russian supplies on armored trains into Ukraine?
We don't know anything about the armored trains. We know that we saw one in Melitopol, so maybe in the south that's been the case. The Russians rely, and it's very adept of you as well to know that the Russian supply lines operate heavily off of railroads, which is kind of a limitation. They're the only country in the world that really does that. That's left, because every country used to do that, but nowadays that's kind of become a thing of the past. Usually, it's aircraft and trucks. Truck convoys that do that kind of transport. But for the Russians, it's trains. So we've seen one in Melitopol, but we haven't seen any anywhere else behind the lines. But as far as attacks on logistics have gone, unfortunately, this would have been in last week's map or the week before that's map. But yes, there have been attacks on logistics. We have been seeing that in some cases where civilians throw Molotovs onto these vehicles, or the civilians are armed with something like a javelin or an in-law or an AT-4 or something like that, and they're destroying the vehicles themselves. So yes, we have been seeing attacks behind the lines. So we do know that partisan activity is present, and that may be hindering Russian logistics a large amount because either they're having to try and protect these convoys from partisan attacks and pull combat vehicles away from the front lines to protect these convoys a little bit more and maybe discourage people from attacking them, or they're not, and these vehicles are just continuously getting destroyed behind the lines. Either way, it's not good for the Russians because it's a disadvantage to them. They're having to tie up resources to try and fix this issue, or they're just losing it, trying to ignore the issue. But that being said, I thank you very much for the question. I hope I answered it pretty well. And I once again thank you for the support. It means a lot to us. And although I kind of do say the same thing at the end of each of these, I do want y'all to know that I am always appreciative and very thankful to the support y'all give to this channel. And so thank you very much once again. And that being said, we're going to move on to the last question, and then we're going to start covering the Southern Front news.
All right, and we have one more question from Rodnov Claw. He puts in another donation of $15. He says, I disagree on your view of China because Taiwan is a non-importance at this point, regardless of the Ukraine invasion results. Xi wants to leave his legacy as an economic unifier, hence his continued push for the One Belt policy.
What was that last part? The one bill policy?
The One Belt policy.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, like, I guess we can agree to disagree, but I believe that the Chinese will not pursue Taiwan because the thing is that Ukraine was an unimportant country as well until it started trying to join NATO, and then it became an important country. Before that, no one cared about Ukraine. Ukraine was just another country like Belarus or Romania or Moldova. They just existed on the map and no one really cared. But once this started happening, people started caring a lot, and that's been the case with Taiwan. Is that we can see that the concern and care for Taiwan has started to increase heavily, and not only that, the West has a vested interest in making sure that Taiwan doesn't fall into Chinese hands because they produce a lot of computer components in Taiwan and export them around the world. So we have a vested interest in making sure that Taiwan stays independent. It also makes sure that our power around the South China Sea can stay largely intact because we will have a somewhat friendly and Western-aligned country in the area. And so that being said, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree. But I thank you once again for the support. I'm glad that you're still supporting the channel, but I thank you nonetheless. And so that being said, we've answered all the questions for the east to south front move. And so now we're going to move on into the southern front and discuss all the events that have happened there today. So the first bit of information we've gotten, and I hate this. Y'all know I'm a big history buff. I love historical things. I love historical buildings, most importantly. And we can see that the Russians have attacked and damaged a 15th century monastery. Gotta show all the pictures. It's aggravating. This thing is so old. It's from the 1400s. So just think about that. That thing is 600 something years old. And it's been damaged a pretty good bit. Now, this isn't the first time. Of course, this is never the first time that an important historical building has been damaged. In World War II, the Cologne Cathedral was damaged. St. Paul's Cathedral was damaged. Just a while ago, the Notre Dame caught on fire about a year or two ago, and the whole entire roof and a lot of the vaults in the ceiling were damaged or destroyed. And so it's not the first time we've seen historical buildings get damaged, but it's always a terrible thing to hear about them being damaged because it's destroying their historical value, in a way, because they're not going to be original after this. They're going to have to reconstruct parts of it and renovate others, so that way they can get rid of the war damage. I hate that. It's incredibly unfortunate. And I hate that the Russians have no respect of culture and would attack something as far removed as this monastery. If you actually look at it on a map, it's somewhere in that area, but it's so far removed from any major and important cities or roadways, the reason for attacking it is entirely unknown. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news, and we can see here that the Ukrainians shot down a Tochka missile fired from Russia with a Stinger missile. We can see the remnants of this Tochka here in the field. Apparently a Stinger can shoot down a Tochka. I did not know that, but that's really interesting to know now. So now we know that you can actually use a Stinger against a cruise missile. It's very interesting. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news, and we can see a destroyed T-72B here. So you can see it right there, burning. Russian Z on it. Good stuff. There's another Russian destroyed T-72 with a little bit of ammo snap crackling and popping inside of it. So now we're going to move on to the next bit of news, and we can see here in Kramatorsk today, we've seen a Russian missile strike. I'm going to show you all this footage real quick. It's rather self-explanatory. You know, a Russian missile struck the city. And so, boom, we can see the damage right there. And of course, this is kind of normal these days. Russians attacking residential areas and the centers of populated city centers. Well, I said centers twice, sorry about that. But we can see them attacking populated city centers over and over and over. It's just something that they've been regularly doing at this point. And it's just infuriating to know that they keep on getting away with this, and no one in the West is starting to really double down on their kind of threats in a way towards Russia, and maybe start going from economic sanctions to more of a militant posturing and more stringent and demanding ultimatums on the Russians and their war. So now you can see here that there are destroyed Russian vehicles in the Luhansk area, the Donetsk-Luhansk area, kind of the Donbass. But a large amount of Russian vehicles seen here destroyed and burning. Russians just can never ever move a convoy anywhere with the whole entire thing being leveled at some point. It's physically impossible for them. I don't know if it's from incompetence or just skill on the Ukrainian part, but the amount of Russian destroyed vehicles we've seen compared to Ukrainian destroyed, and I've seen a lot of Ukrainian destroyed vehicles that haven't been put on stream because, you know, it's an accepted fact that they're getting destroyed, and also on top of that, it gives locations sometimes of where they're destroyed, and I don't want to put that stuff on stream, because although it does give a more truer image of what's happening in the war, at the same time, it may let the Russians know that there are more Ukrainian destroyed vehicles than they have counted. And so it may start giving them a better picture of how many destroyed Ukrainian vehicles there are in an area and how much weaker the Ukrainians may be. And so I try and keep that stuff. I try and keep most things about the Ukrainians out of the stream, because most footage will only harm them instead of help them. So we're going to move on to the next bit that we've seen on the Donetsk-Luhansk front. And we can see an Mi-24 on patrol here. I'm going to show you all this video. Interesting. It's about a minute long. See another helicopter's flown over. Let's make sure. I want to make sure of this just again because I couldn't really see it well enough. So let me replay again. Those, I can't really tell. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me play that one more time. I cannot tell, but I do not see a red star. So maybe they're Ukrainian. I don't know. Wait, no, sorry, correction. Those can't be Ukrainian because we just saw a Russian vehicle on that street, and we know that helicopter was circled around and probably attacked it, but nonetheless, it's just moving on, so it must be a Russian helicopter. take another look at this one, and then we're going to cut the video. I just can't tell. So we're going to say that they're Russian, because that would only make sense that Russian helicopters are flying over a Russian convoy, most likely to protect it. So now we're going to move on to the city of Mariupol, which has become a focal point of the news because the city appears to be in somewhat rough shape, and we're not really sure how much longer this city will be able to last. A while ago, about 5 days ago, I said that the city would probably hold for the next 24 to 48 hours, but of course the Ukrainians are the masters of surprise, and so they surprised me and have lasted 5 more days. And so I don't want to really give a date anymore on Mariupol and when I expect it to fall, because I feel like the Ukrainians will surprise me, and they will last much longer than I expect. So I don't really know how long they'll last. They may last a day, or they may last another 2 weeks. I'm not really sure, so I'm not really going to give an estimate on that. But we can take a look at the news that we've seen from inside Mariupol today, and maybe get an image of what the fighting inside the city looks like as of now. We can see that there are Chechens in Mariupol. We already know that this has been a fact. There's a lot of Kadyrvites around. So I'm going to show you all this. Now, I'm not a big fan of the Kadyrvite Chechens, as you know. So I hope that these people get wiped out later on. Also, another thing, I've seen this happen too many times in videos of certain terrorist organizations in the Middle East, but doing this little move here with RPG like that is just so stupid and terrible, okay? Because I'll tell you why. And it doesn't take anyone with military training to know this, it just takes common sense, you know? Like, this is kind of like the same thing as saying don't put your hand on a hot stove. This is kind of like the same line of reasoning. This guy is running back here, okay? Let's say instead of running right, he started running left to look around that vehicle and fire. This guy didn't give a single second to say backblast and make sure anyone was clear behind the kind of like exhaust of this RPG. Instead, he just runs out, Bob fires it immediately. If that guy had gone left, his face would have turned into a fine jam. And so, I've seen that way too many times on videos of Syrian fighters and fighters from another group that was very common in the Middle East, but I'm not going to say them on stream. Y'all know who I'm talking about. I'm sure that YouTube will probably come down here and get me. But, yeah, I've seen it too many times to know that that is a stupid idea. And that shows you how poorly trained that these Chechens are, or how much little they care about safety in their training. And I'm sure that they've had something like that happen before, where someone popped out like that, shot that thing without yelling out backblast or anything like that to make sure that the line behind them was clear, and they just wiped out one of their own doing that. Hopefully, the Ukrainians taught him a lesson afterwards. Hopefully, one of the Ukrainians turned around and gave that guy a taste of backblast later on in the day. But nonetheless, we're going to move on to the next bit of news that we've gotten, and we can see some of the destruction in Mariupol at this point. We've seen a lot of it, but it's always good. It's always good to see it and refresh our memories as to how careless and how evil the Russians have been conducting themselves in this war. So, nonetheless, here's the footage.
Вот это кому я ходил, вот это сестры муж погиб в этой фигне.
So as you can see there, damage is pretty extensive to most of these Khrushchevkas. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news. We have 3 more bits of news in the city, and most of them appear to have come from the eastern side. We can see here that we see more destroyed T-72s in Mariupol. Just look at that. Beautiful stuff. This looks like it was a T-72B3 at a point, but now it's just not. It's good to see. And we see this one that looks like it just burned down to nothing but the turret. But I'd like to know from some people who may be able to speak Russian in the chat, what is on the muzzle brake? Not the muzzle brake. I'm sorry, the thermal discharger. I'm not really. I think that's the name of that thing. No, I'm sorry. I know now. The barrel evacuator. If someone could translate what's on that barrel evacuator from what you can read right there, I'd be highly appreciative. And if you have any assumptions about what it could be, make sure to let us know in the chat. So that way one of our moderators can pick it up. It can be sent to Matthew, or Matthew can get the answer directly. So that way next time we go to the round of questions, we can know what was on that muzzle brake. So now we're going to move on to the next bit of news that we've gotten inside of Mariupol. And we see the Russians clearing apartments in Mariupol. And I'd love for y'all to notice this, the lack of gunfire in the distance. It's like they're doing this in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to let y'all watch the video. All you can hear is the wind. It's like they're in the middle of nowhere and nothing's happening, and they're filming this in the safest place possible. It's like this is staged, is what I'm trying to say. Now we hear a little bit of fire, but it's so small in an amount.
Да. Отходи с пролета.
So when you see a big old RT watermark, I also like y'all to know RT it has been banned off of YouTube, which is great because they are such such a Russian pro-Russian propagandist channel. I mean, they sat there and tried to say that the F-15 was a waste of money, you know, in terms of like the military acquiring F-15s, and that's not true at all. And they've just tried to push so many lies about everything American and be like anti-American and pro-Russian. So just check out the rest of this. So here they go up another floor.
Там свои сейчас два.
Also, I would like y'all to notice that this guy screwed up pretty well. Right here, you can tell that he was about to do something else, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm supposed to be doing another thing." Look, he was going to move forward. You could tell by this guy's hand motions he wasn't, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, let me look down the stairs and look really cool." See that? All right, let's go back and watch that one more time continuously so that way everyone can get the picture of what I'm talking about, all right? Take a look at this. Take a look at this fake stuff here. Look. He's like, wait. And then he's like, oh, yeah. And then he starts looking down the stairs.
Снизу свои все.
Nothing's going on in this building. There's no one in here. There's not even any gunfire. None of that. We're going to cut the video short because I'm not into Russian propaganda, and you can see the RT is doing nothing but pumping that stuff out. They're not in Mariupol. You would be hearing gunfire if they were in Mariupol. This could be anywhere where there's a Khrushchevka high-rise because they all look the same. They could be way behind the lines, miles behind the lines, doing this in another building. So, just want y'all, I mean, like, you know, it may be that they're actually Mariupol, yeah, but but my opinion is that this is all made up. So we're going to move on to the next bit of news. And the last bit of news from Mariupol, and we can see here that Mariupol citizens are being deported by the Russians. We know that there's been about 2,000 of them at the moment that have been deported, and they're being transported to an unknown location inside of Russia, and their fate beyond that is unknown. We don't know what's happening to them, but we do know that they're being sent out of the country, which is concerning. There's a whole lot of theories, but I don't want to go into theories too much because we don't have anything definitive yet. But that's very concerning, and I hope and pray for their safety and their return to Ukraine after the war. We're now going to move on to the city of Odessa because we've gotten no news in Kherson or Mykolaiv today. I don't know what that's supposed to suggest because, as we know, the Ukrainians were making good progress last we heard. So I'm not really sure if this suggests a stall on the Ukrainian counteroffensive, or if the Ukrainian counteroffensive is going incredibly well and they're not publicizing how well it's going. It could be good or bad. We'll just have to see in the coming days what the news reveals to us and what the video footage shows us to be happening in this area. So now we're going to move on to the area of Odessa, where we can see that the Ukrainians are mining the beaches near Odessa. And they're not mining for gold, they're mining for Russians. They're planting them like seeds on a spring, like on a good spring day.
Они думают, что, блядь, они этим, блядь, все, блядь, сделали, блядь.
Дебилы, блядь, сука. Хлопцы, блядь. Видели, блядь? На море, блядь. Бомбы поставили, блядь. Которые, блядь, люди, блядь, стоят вот. Перепрыгнуть, собаки бегают, блядь. Сука, черти, блядь. Ёбаные, блядь. Украина хуево, блядь. Чтоб тебе, сука...
It's just good to know that they're getting ready just in case of the worst. We know that no Russian naval invasion has occurred yet, and we know for sure that the breakthrough of Mykolaiv will not be happening anytime soon. So that's all good news. We know that Odessa isn't under direct threat as of now. They may be under imminent threat, but it is not direct and oncoming within the next few days, as far as I can tell. That's entirely my opinion, though, based off of the facts and information, and I may be wrong because that may actually happen tomorrow for all we know. So now we're going to start moving on to the rest of the news around the country, and we've only had one, and that is news that's been hyped up today to a great deal, but I actually think it's not that big of a deal. I'm going to explain why. The Russians have used a hypersonic missile to hit an ammunition depot at Ivano City. I don't really know the end of the name. Let me make sure. Maybe it's in here. No, it's not. But anyways, this ammo depot was hit near Ivano with a hypersonic cruise missile. It was launched from a MiG-31, and it appears to have hit the target dead on. But the thing is, though, is that I pulled up how fast this hypersonic missile went, and it only goes Mach 5. And while that sounds fast, I believe normal ballistic missiles, some of them, may reach that speed at some point in their flight. But let me pull that up. Average speed of ballistic missile. That was spelled terribly. 7 kilometers a second. So let's pull up how fast is a hypersonic missile. Let's see, that doesn't really explain. 7 kilometers a second. So let's do some quick math here. 7 kilometers a second for a ballistic missile. So 7 kilometers a second. There's 60 seconds in a minute. So it's going 420 miles a minute. And then we multiply that by another 60. Well, let me make sure that's correct. 6,100 kilometers per hour. That's an intercontinental ballistic missile, though. Let's see if we can find a intermediate range ballistic missile. What is the average speed of intermediate? Sorry if I'm spelling poorly. I'm just, my brain's kind of on other things. 15,000 miles per hour. But this isn't what we're looking for. Well, I'm just gonna have to give up on that. We know it's traveling about Mach 5, though, the hypersonic missile is. The thing is, though, is that I think most cruise missiles are traveling at that speed. And the only difference in between this hypersonic missile and a normal ballistic missile is that this one's able to travel at a lower altitude, and that's really the only advantage to it. So, it's not as big of a deal as people are trying to make it out to be. An ICBM already travels much faster, from what we can tell, than this hypersonic cruise missile. So I don't really think it's as big of a hype up and concern as some groups of people are trying to make it out to be. It's just a new form of weapons delivery platform. It does its job a little bit differently than a normal ballistic missile. But if y'all know better, please do let me know in the comments, because I would like to know how fast an average ballistic missile like a Tochka or anything like that can fly, because it'd be good to know in comparison what it's going up against rather than an ICBM, because obviously the Russians aren't using ICBMs. So, now we're going to move on to the international news. So we're nearly going to get to the questions, everyone. So just hang on, and we're going to get to everyone's question. Also, well, I'm going to ask that in a minute. So we're going to move on to the international news, and we can see here that German Patriot SAM systems are on their way towards Slovakia. I also put this marker in Poland just so that way it'd be closer to Ukraine for me to click. So it's not actually in Poland. This is in the Czech Republic heading towards Slovakia. Very good to see, though. We don't know if they're going to hand them over to the Ukrainians. But if they do, that's going to be a big deal. That's going to be some extra modern and very well made equipment that the Ukrainians will have. Very quality stuff, very similar to a Javelin in terms of its effectiveness if it will be fielded by the Ukrainians if they do get it. So now we're going to move on to the last bit of news today from Moscow, and it appears that there were snipers at a circus. I'm going to show you all this and let y'all see it for yourselves. It was really weird to me. There's a guy up here and a guy over here, and you can see that this guy actually has a sniper rifle, and this was purportedly at a circus. We can see another picture here more clearly showing the scope and also the muzzle brake on this rifle. And then finally we can see that it's not a muzzle brake, it's actually a suppressor. And we can also see the scope and the sniper rifle there again. I don't really know what that's there for, and if this is a circus, that's... yeah, it is, because that says in Russian, "Surki," which is like a circus. I don't know what that's there for. Like, why are they having that as at a circus? A very questionable stuff. Nonetheless, we've actually covered all the news for today around the world and inside of Ukraine. As you can see, the situation looks to be pretty decent for the Ukrainians. It appears that they are holding. And so, that being said, we're about to start taking questions. But before we hear the first question, how many Super Chats do we have, Matthew?
So at the moment, it looks like we're sitting at about 40 Super Chats. So quite a few. And also, I just want to give some clarification on something that was mentioned earlier. One of the moderators mentioned that something you mentioned earlier is the Amazon 13 or Amazonka 13, if you know what that's in reference to.
I believe that's not what was on the muzzle brake. Let's go back and check that, and let's see if that's what it actually says, because I can read Russian a little, so maybe I can find that again. Destroy T-72s in Mariupol. It says Zonka 13. Yeah, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about the muzzle brake. So, thank you very much for the clarification. But can we get, can you see, Matthew, if they'll send you what that actually means in Russian, if we can get an idea of what part of a word that may be, if it's a common one, and if you do get that, can we circle back to that in the questioning and get an answer to that?
For sure.
All right. So with that being said, we're going to now move on to the questions. Also, before we do, I want y'all all to know that there will be a cutoff now. We do have a super high amount of super chats to answer tonight, and so I don't want anyone to send in a super chat and not get their worth out of it if you have a question. So if you have a question, please hold your super chat until tomorrow and put it in first thing in the stream, and we'll make sure to answer it as best as we can. So I thank you all very much for your support, and I also thank everyone who may not donate a super chat now due to that news that we'll do tomorrow for their support as well. Because I'm so glad that a lot of y'all appreciate this news and that we keep on continuing to deliver this news on a daily basis. It's very tiring for us, but my reward is sitting here and being able to talk about it and know that a load of people are getting a lot of information out of it. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the first question.
Okay, and by the way, one of the moderators did respond. They said that it just literally means the Amazon or the river. So that's pretty straightforward enough. But on to the first question. The first question is from Brant Sturgill. He asks, why doesn't Ukraine blow up the bridge coming from Russia to Crimea? Because that would be a big blow to them.
I don't really know why they wouldn't have. Maybe they could aim some kind of ballistic missile at that bridge and blow it up. But I'm not really sure why they haven't. I think that that's something that they've looked into, maybe, but haven't committed to because they're not wanting to attack, I guess, as you would call it, civilization, much like the Russians are to them, because then that's going to make them look like they're doing an eye for an eye kind of thing, and they'll lose the status of being better than the Russians in most of the world's eyes if they were to start doing that, because I'm sure that bridge is heavily used and it would probably incur a large amount of civilian casualties if they were to attack that bridge at any time of the day. So, I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that. There's a lot of variables that could affect that. You know, it could be because there's a lot of air defenses around that bridge because the Russians consider it important. It could be that the ships in the Sea of Azov would probably intercept most aircraft and shoot them down. You know, it's not that the aircraft are flying around in the sky or anything, but they would probably be able to shoot the aircraft down as they're flying over the Sea of Azov. Or it could be it could just be a load factor. So I'm not really sure. But maybe we can get clarification about that after the war and see if there was a reason why they didn't do that. Because I would have to agree, that is a important strategic target right there, is that one bridge. Because if they blew it up, that would take weeks or months of repairs and rebuilding to bring that bridge back up to an operational state. So I thank you very much for the question, and I'm sorry I couldn't answer it a lot, but I hope that I did give a good idea of the limitations that the Ukrainians may be facing and the reason why they haven't hit that bridge yet. But once again, thank you very much. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, before I get to the next question, I just want to mention that there are several people in the comments mentioning that the Amazon actually means strong woman. So there appears to be a little bit of a conflict between the information we're getting here. So I'm not really sure which one is the correct answer, but it seems to be the consensus in the chat that it means strong woman instead. I just want to clarify that before I move on to the next question. The next one is from Colin McEwen. He says, thanks for another fantastic recap. How does Ukraine target their artillery and missile strikes? Do they use GPS coordinates or is it just trial and error? And does targeting info come from drones or spotters or NATO recon?
I'm sure that a lot of the targeting that they're doing is based off of drone spotters. The drones probably fly out, find the location of Russian units, or infantry on the ground call out the location of these units, which then leads to a drone spotter being sent to that area, and then the artillery will fire a couple of, I guess you could call them kind of like targeting shots, aiming shots, because that's kind of what I called them when I'm at the range. But they'll fire a couple of those shots to see how far off their initial aim was. They'll then adjust, and then once the shells start landing dead on, then they just start going at it. But I believe that they're using a lot of drones to do most of the spotting, and if they don't have drones, I bet the infantry is doing a lot of the spotting and adjustments for the artillery. So it kind of is a trial and error kind of thing in a way. But they may be using GPS as well, because I'm not really an artillery expert, so I really can't testify as to all the different ways that the artillery can get their coordinates and fire directions to be able to fire at these targets that they can't even see themselves. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to profess a little bit of ignorance beyond what I've said, because I really don't have enough knowledge about the process that Ukrainian artillery uses to target enemy positions. But I do hope that gives a little bit of a better idea of what they might be doing. Hopefully, I can get off of this call and figure out for myself from someone who may have been in the artillery how that works and how the Ukrainians may be operating their artillery units. But once again, I thank you very much for the question and support. Hope I answered that to a pretty good deal. And that being said, we're moving on to the next question.
Okay, I just want to give two quick shout outs to SN941222 and Kevin Dixon. Thank you very much for your donations. We do appreciate the support very much. The next question is from Reener. He says, very true, Russian equipment is being destroyed, but Ukraine cities are still being hit by missiles and no one is hitting the launchers in Russia. How can they stop them? Any thinking on that? Thank you.
At the moment, I don't really believe there's a way they can stop missiles being fired from inside of Russia. That's kind of something that the Ukrainians may not have the scale or the budget to do, or the equipment to do, to commit to that. So I believe that there's really nothing they can do to stop the Russians from firing missiles inside of Russia towards Ukrainian cities. So unfortunately, that's just kind of a fact of reality, is that even though you could probably take care of the artillery inside of Ukraine that's attacking Kharkiv and so on, you couldn't really take care of the stuff that's firing from inside of Russia. So I hope I answered that question pretty well, and I thank you very much for your support. Unfortunately, unfortunately, it's kind of a short answer, because there's just really nothing they can do as far as I know, and beyond firing a cruise missile at one artillery vehicle, which would be ineffective and very costly for the Ukrainians. So I don't believe that they'll be doing that. But I thank you very much once again. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next question is from John Klein. He says, triple espresso money. Fairly new viewer, so you might have already covered this, but it sure looks like Putin is trying to recreate the Nova Rus. If so, Moldova would be logically next on the list.
Thank you very much for giving a super chat, and I'm very happy that you're new. Welcome to the stream. I hope you like it. By the way, everyone, if you have been liking the stream so far, subscribing, I mean, like, that's great. I'm very happy about that, but YouTube deletes subscribers, so that's not a big deal. Like it, though, because if you like this news and you think it's worth watching, if you like it, it helps us out in the algorithms, and it gets out to more people. And so the more y'all like this video, the farther this gets out. So just wanted to let y'all know that if you do support this, it helps us to reach larger audiences if y'all like the videos. But moving on from that, could you recap that question again near the end, the last part of it?
Yeah, he wanted to know if Putin was trying to recreate the Nova Rus, and if so, Moldova would logically be next on the list.
Yes, I can agree with that. I believe that he's already kind of made it clear. This is almost like the Lebensraum kind of idea that the Germans had. He's trying to reunite all the former Russian lands, the Baltic states, parts of Poland, Ukraine. Belarus is already in his pocket, and then Moldova would be included in that, and maybe even further on, but not really. But I do believe that he's trying to reunite all former Russian imperial lands because that's what he's made clear. It doesn't look like he's trying to reform the Soviet Union. I believe that he thinks that he is the new Russian czar because all of the symbolism of the Russian government now is very much based off of the Russian Empire. Let me just pull up the Kremlin guards and show you their uniforms. I forgot their names, like the name of that specific unit. Let me try and show you their ceremonial uniforms right here. Okay, that is as close to Imperial Russia as you can get in terms of uniforms. I believe this unit was formed around 2012, 2014. It's fairly new, but you can tell that it's Russia's ambition, Putin's ambition specifically, to start getting back into that Russian imperial kind of regard. Because his goals aren't trying to reform the Soviet Union. We can tell that. Clearly, it's the Russian Empire. And I don't know why everyone wants to make it the Soviet Union thing. I guess that's kind of because that's been the joke and the thing is that he's trying to reform the Soviet Union. But I believe it's become more clear now that it's going to be a Russian imperial thing. So that being said, yes, I can agree. Moldova may be next on the list. So they may want to start eyeballing a little bit of a friendship with NATO, maybe. Although that will probably put them right on the firing line immediately, considering that Transnistria does have Russian soldiers in it. But that being said, I hope I've answered the question well enough. I do agree with you, actually. That's actually a pretty good point. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and the next question is from longtime channel supporter Knuckles. We appreciate the donation of $10, Knuckles, and he says there are about 7 NATO countries that are talking about maybe doing a NATO peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. Poland said that the people would have to be armed, though. What does this entail?
I believe that this is, in my opinion, I believe that this may be a little bit of a puffery and sales talk to make NATO look a little bit better. I don't believe they would not commit to that at all because that would be about the same as doing a no-fly zone. Because if you send NATO peacekeeping troops into Kiev and the Russians fire on them and they fire back, that's NATO firing on Russia and Russia firing on NATO. That's pretty much war in a way. And I'm sure that the Russians will make it clear in a day that they'll nuke the entire Western world if these NATO countries try and go through with that. So I'm sure that that won't actually be followed through. But if it was, that would be incredibly interesting, and I'd like to see what would happen if that did become a reality. Would the Russians respond as they usually have, with brute force and trying to threaten the West with annihilation if that continues? Or would they maybe start to try and take a less aggressive stance towards that and just to test it, but continue the war as normal? I would like to see that. Maybe, I don't really know how that would go, really. So, only time will tell on that one. But I hope I've answered the question. I thank you very much again for being a return supporter, and I hope that you did see that I responded to that video last night in your Discord, because I try and respond to everyone, and I actually got around to it, looked at the video, and I put my input there. But I thank you very much for being a repeat supporter of my channel. It means a lot to me, and I'm very glad that we have very big fans of this channel. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Rio. He asks, is there a simple, damage-tolerant, easy-to-learn airplane that the United States can sell, lend, or lease to Ukraine, hard points for lethal munitions, and a 30-millimeter cannon to shred some vehicles and helicopters, etc.?
I think there's some options for that, but, and I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the A-10. Honestly, though, I don't know. Let me check this here. Okay, there's only 300. Okay, well, getting a chance of sending one of those over would be kind of rough. But if NATO was to send over aircraft, I feel, and this is just me, I could be entirely wrong, but something like a Super Tucano or a Bronco would be more suited to that, I believe. I don't know why, I'm just feeling like they're much cheaper to field, easier to repair than a jet aircraft, and so they would be much more efficient. Really, to be honest, let's pull up the Super Tucano for everyone who doesn't know what one of those are. This is one of the cheapest close air support vehicles that you can get. They're very effective from what we've been told, and I've heard nothing but praise of these. And they're talking about maybe in the future, although this was just nothing but talk, I don't think this will actually happen, but they were saying that they may start replacing A-10s with these Super Tucanos because they're much cheaper to operate. But I don't think now that's going to happen, and there's a lot of people who love the A-10 for what it does, although I think the 30mm gun is kind of a little hyped up. Really, the A-10 is much better for the amount of hard points it has, more so than the gun, because the gun only works on softer, well, on softer targets, on tanks, not so much from what we can tell. But nonetheless, I believe that a Super Tucano would probably be a pretty good thing to send over, but they've been built in such a limited number, and I think the A-10s have been built to a much larger degree. So let's pull that up. I'm sorry for doing all this fact-checking and researching. Usually I do this off-stream. But there's been 716 A-10s built. Don't know how many destroyed. There was about 7 of them shot down in the invasion of Iraq, and I don't know how many were shot down in the Gulf War and so on. Well, actually, I think it was 7 in the Gulf War. Nonetheless, some of them have been shot down, so this number is not completely representative of how many are still in service or in working condition. So, still, yeah, I think an A-10 or some sort of ground support vehicle like a Super Tucano or a Bronco would be very effective for the Ukrainians, because close air support is something that they do need. But they also need fighters as well, and they need to try and get those MiG-29s in Poland over to Ukraine somehow. I don't really know how they'll manage it, because it seems like it's become too difficult, but hopefully they'll find a way. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope I answered that question. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
All right, and the next question is from Tito McLovin. Thank you for your $10 donation. He says, would you agree the battlefields of Ukraine would be a perfect opportunity for DARPA or other research agencies to test classified weapons in a live, hostile environment?
Yes and no. Because while it is a live, hostile environment, that leads to the chance that these weapons could be captured. And then that classified technology immediately falls into the enemy hands. There is always the case of that, because I was actually talking to Paul the other day, and we were talking about the Javelin and that it has some classified stuff on it, and the Russians haven't gotten a hold of a CLU. But I saw a video today that didn't go on stream where the Russians had actually managed to capture about 2 or 3 CLUs. So they now have an entire Javelin set, the missile and the CLU included. So I don't that being said, we can see now that classified technology that we send over to Ukraine does have the ability of being captured in intact in its entirety. So I don't really think they'd like to send over classified technology that they're still working on to test it out, because there is the chance that it could be captured intact by the Russians, and then they get to dissect the most modern and up-to-date Western technology available and start reverse engineering it. So I don't really think they would do that, but it is something that I could see. So I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they are, but we don't have any information to go either way. But I hope that answered your question as far as what my opinion is on that. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and next up is another question from Colin McEwen. Thank you for your continued support. He says, I wonder if there are any Russian or Ukrainian speakers on the channel who might be able to help out with translations for posts that are written in Russian or Ukrainian. Just an idea.
We do actually have a translation station inside of our Discord, so if you do speak Russian or Ukrainian, make sure to join the Discord and let my moderators know that you would like to get into translating. They'll then probably ask you to translate something just to see if you are like a competent speaker of Ukrainian or Russian, and then they'll verify that or check it with their already kind of like translators in a way, already verified translators, and then if you pass that qualification, you'll be brought into our translating group. Unfortunately, how the scheduling has kind of worked, we have started to do this in mass in the afternoon, gathering all the information instead of midday and then the afternoon. We've been gathering it all up in the afternoon now because of how our data collection is working due to having multiple people in it. So we're trying to use the translators, but it is hard due to scheduling constraints. But I thank you very much for the question, and we do have a way to get translators onto the server, so if you'd like to do that, make sure to go check that out and check in with my moderators. They'll help you get through that process. And so I thank you very much once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
The next donation is from Kelly Armstrong with a $10 donation. She says, I just subscribed to your channel. Thanks for all your hard work and what you're doing to support Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm very glad that you approve of what we're doing on this channel. Also, if you approve of what we're doing tonight, just reporting the news, stay tuned tomorrow, because it is going to be wild, because we're probably going to raise another $30,000 for another group that's helping out citizens of Ukraine. Tomorrow, since it's getting really late in the stream, and a lot of people are watching, I'm just going to say who it is. We are going to be fundraising Doctors Without Borders. It's going to start tomorrow, and we're going to hope to have raised $25,000 by the end of the stream tomorrow. I know it's possible. I believe in all my viewers. They were able to pull through last time, and we got $29,000 in donations. And so I know that tomorrow we can probably do the same, if not even better. I want to use this channel as a force of good and a force of goodwill. And so that combined, hopefully tomorrow will be an incredibly successful fundraiser, and we can help out another charitable cause that has very good intentions. So I thank y'all all once again for the support to the channel, and hopefully y'all support the fundraiser tomorrow, because y'all know that I put a big deal of support into the fundraisers, and I'll also once again be chipping in a decent chunk of the money I have into this fundraiser. And so I thank y'all all once again for your support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next question is from Matthew James. He says, I believe an intercontinental ballistic missile maximum speed is around Mach 15 to 20, or around 15,000 to 18,000 miles per hour at the time of Earth's atmosphere reentry. Fantastic stream as well.
Thank you very much for the support. And we did get a number on the intercontinental ballistic missile speed, but I'm wondering what the average speed of a standard intermediate range ballistic missile or a smaller ballistic missile is, because we do know that the cruise missiles go rather slow, like around 480 miles per hour probably, from what we can tell from them flying over cities. They look like they're just going slow. But as far as the ballistic missiles go that are of a smaller size than an ICBM, we don't really have a number for that. And so I'm trying to compare this hypersonic missile, which is claimed to be so much faster, to something we really don't have data on. So I would like to get some more data on the intermediate range missiles and the smaller ones that the Russians probably are using in this conflict, so that way we can get a really good idea as to what that hypersonic missile is being compared to in speed, because that's the main marketing focus of trying to hype up this missile, is its raw speed. And so I thank you very much for the question, well actually the answer. But if you could try and circle back and get us a number on the intermediate range missiles, because I couldn't get a number on that, let one of our moderators know, and they'll shoot that over to Matthew, so that way he can give us a more accurate number on how fast the smaller missiles are. So I thank you very much once again for your support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and the next question is from, I believe it's pronounced Yakaki, I'm not really sure, but it's a donation of $8. They say, do you think Ukraine has subs in the Black Sea? If so, do you think there are plans to attack Russians if they attempt to land in Mariupol? I love your channel.
Thank you very much for loving the channel. I don't know the actual strength of the Ukrainian Navy. I know that their flagship sank at, I believe, Odessa or Mykolaiv. It wasn't. I could never get an answer as to which city it sank at. But let's see here if we can actually get a number on the ships. List of active Ukrainian Navy ships. Let's see about their submarine fleet. Being tested. So they have some new ships being tested here. Further arrangements. Okay, that's nothing that they have right now. Let's go back up to the top and see if they have any subs. They have the surface fleet here. They have some patrol boats, more patrol boats, a fast assault craft, anti-diversion craft, patrol cutter, some ribs. They have... Everyone loves a rib, you know, everyone loves a rib with barbecue sauce. I don't actually see that they have submarines, so they may not have submarines. Let's pull that up. Does Ukraine have submarines? Does Ukraine have submarines? They have one, and it's called the Zaporizhia. Wait a minute, hang on. Was only submarine of the Ukrainian Navy up until her seizure during the annexation of Crimea. Okay, so this was the only submarine that Ukraine had, a very old Foxtrot-class submarine, until it was seized in 2014. So at the moment, they have no submarines. So the answer to that question would be no. They won't be able to attack Russian fleets out at sea with submarines because they simply don't have any. So I hope I answered that question pretty well, and thank you very much for the support. And we're now going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and the next question is from OG Wakanobi. He says, perfect timing, bro. I was just wishing you'd show up tonight and give us a boost.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you support the channel as well, because that gives me a huge boost. So I thank you very much once again, and I thank you for being a return donor. It means a lot to us that a lot of people are fans, and I'm glad that a lot of people continuously support our channel, because it helps us out continuing to make this information every single day. And so I thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next comment we have is from Mark Bohachuk, and he leaves a $5 donation, and once again, he says, to the coffee fund.
Hey, everyone loves a bit of coffee. I mean, at this point, I think two things have kind of become the main tenets of this channel as far as the news goes. The phrase, that being said, and I'm glad, and I'm sorry that some of y'all hate that phrase. I guess it's kind of like the small world ride at Disney World. Some of y'all love it, some of y'all hate it, a lot of y'all love it, but a decent amount of y'all also hate it as well. I'm sorry for the people who hate it, but for the other people who love it, it's a funny little joke, and so I hope y'all just kind of go along with it, because sometimes I have a gap of things I can say to transition from thing to thing, so I just say that being said. So I'm sorry to the ones who dislike it, but to the ones who do like it, y'all just got plastered right then with how many times I said it. Also, coffee has become the other big thing, and so I thank you so much for continuing the coffee fund. Once this war is over, I was actually thinking about doing some things with coffee mugs with like little phrases from this channel on it. But that's for another time. But I thank y'all all nonetheless for your support, and also for continuing to give me a bit of money to get coffee with. And so, that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
The next question is from longtime channel supporter Mihavel P. He says, have you seen Russians bringing already decommissioned Tochka-U launchers to Belarus?
We haven't, but we have seen that Tochka-U's have been shot down over Ukraine, the actual missiles themselves. So we do know that they are using them, but I haven't actually seen them enter Belarus. So to answer that question, I haven't seen it, but we have seen them being, well, we have seen the results of them being used. And so I thank you very much for the question. And we also know that the Ukrainians are using them in a large amount. So in terms of this war, I don't really think they're kind of like decommissioned or old. It seems like they're actually kind of standard equipment for both sides. But I do thank you for the question. I haven't seen it though, but I once again thank you for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, before I move on to the next question, just a quick shout out to Rio, Pomp Pomp, and also Ann Yulia. Thank you very much for your donations and your support of the channel. And moving on to the next question is from James Lynn. He says, the Russians are losing so many generals, they're going to have to call up Mike Flynn from the bullpen.
That's a pretty good joke. I don't really like to get involved in American party politics, as you know. So unfortunately, I really can't talk about Mike Flynn too much at the moment, because it's kind of a sideshow to what's going on in Ukraine. I don't want that to become like the focal point in like the streams or the chat. And if I say anything about it, it may. But yeah, they might have to. So I thank you very much for the support, and also the super chat, because it was pretty good, and also the joke was pretty good as well. I can get a good laugh out of that. So thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
The next question is from Geoff L. He says, with that being said, keep up the good work.
Thank you very much for the support, and that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Joe Ben. He says, for all of the gamers out there, Humble Bundle has a stand with Ukraine bundle. Okay, so I think that might be a plug for another channel. But Joe, thank you very much for your support. We appreciate the donation. The next question is once again, from Knuckles. He says, please verify about flooring, as I read the Ukrainians actually did the flooring or flooding to try and stop the Russians from advancing. Just wanted to put what I read.
I do not believe that would be true, because this flood has coincided with the Ukrainian counteroffensive, and also the satellite images showing that Russians are digging in and putting tanks into hold down positions by digging in like large foxholes for them to drive these tanks into. So it would make more sense that the Russians blew up the dam and flooded the Irpin River to try and stop the Ukrainian advance, because that would be contradictive to all the information and data we've collected so far to say that that's the Ukrainians trying to stop the Russian advance, when at the moment the Ukrainians are the ones who are advancing north of Kiev. So, I mean, like, that may be the case. Maybe something has changed today that they haven't made publicly clear. But as far as I know, the counteroffensive is still succeeding in pushing the Russians back. So at this moment, from what I know, the Russians blew it up to try and stop the Ukrainian advance, which would make more sense considering all the news and information we've gotten to surround that claim. But nonetheless, I thank you very much for the support. And the question, it's a good question. It raises a decent bit of concern to see whether that's true or not. But based off of the information that we've been getting, I think it's mostly true to say that it is the Russians, because it would coincide with all the facts about the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and the next question is from Wampa Gaming. He says, "Hey bro, I'm proud of you and your mods for staying up and dedicating your time to this event. Keep it up."
Thank you very much for the support. We all put in a lot of effort, and while my mods, I always give them a lot of credit, because I feel like in the earlier parts of this channel, they were kind of the unsung heroes, but they put in a lot of work for the time that the stream is up and after, in the server itself. And so I've got to thank them loads for doing this, because they are helping me out, and in the end, they're helping the Ukrainian cause out a little, because they help make the chat a hospitable place to talk in. And so people can ask questions and we can go through Q&As like this. And so I thank them very much for what they do. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next comment is from Paul Heil. He leaves a $10 donation. He says, "Great informative channel, but I don't have any questions." So thank you very much, Paul, for the support. We appreciate it. And next up, we do have a question from Keel Hall with a donation of $5. He says, "How long would it take Ukraine to bring up all of its reserves, and would they be effective in a major counterattack?"
I believe that Ukraine has mobilized almost all of their reserves at this moment, from what we know, but we don't actually have a specific number on that, because that would give the Russians a bit of an upper hand to know exactly how many reserves they've mobilized. But I believe that the answer to that question is that they've already mobilized them, and I believe they're already being used to the highest effectiveness they can be, because we've seen a lot of footage of TDFs engaging enemy forces. So I hope that answers the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And that being said, before we move on to the next question, how many do we have left?
So it looks like we have approximately 15 left.
All right. And that being said, the next question.
Okay, and I just want to give a really big shout out to Gordon Buchsbaum. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm probably not, but please let me know in the chat if I'm not. He leaves a donation of $500.
Whoa!
He says, "Great job reporting and keeping us up to date. Here's to your new assistant fund. Keep up the great work."
Golly, God, wow. Thank you so much for that. Good Lord, that's actually the highest super chat we've ever gotten. That's amazing. I thank you so much for that. I can't ever believe when, oh, okay, here I go on the rant, of course, because I can't ever believe when people support this channel that much. But I'm so happy that y'all find this content this good, because someone brought this up the other day, and I guess this is kind of the way this channel is going, is that we're kind of coming up with a new business model as far as news goes. We report the news how we get it, and then we get direct support from our viewers to continue this channel running. It's kind of like a newspaper in a way, how you pay for a subscription, but with us, it's just like kind of like support, and we answer questions, and so we give you all something in return for your continued support. And I cannot believe that you just gave that much in a super chat. I'm so thankful for that. It means a lot to us here at this channel, and it helps us to continue running it. And I can't thank you enough. It's unbelievable. I just can't believe it. I mean, that's insane. So I'm going to stop rambling and get to the rest of the questions, but I want you to know that you hold a special place for me now, because you're helping out this channel to means which are unbelievable. And I thank everyone who donates, but that is impressive right there. And I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad you enjoy the content. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and the next question is from OG Wakanobi again. He says the northern front east of Kiev looks like an orc getting punched in the face.
Uh, I guess I don't really see that really, but I guess I mean like yeah, maybe I just don't have a creative imagination because I've seen this front line so much, but maybe to me it kind of looks like Vermont up here. If a lot of people can agree with me on that, and New Hampshire would be right over here, but not really so much the case here. But that kind of looks like Vermont to me up on the northeastern side of Kiev. But anyways, we're gonna thank you very much for the support and thank you for bringing that up, and we're gonna move on to the next question.
All right, and the next comment is from Laurie Gaddis. Laurie says, thank you so much for keeping your content original. You guys rock. And thank you very much for the support, Laurie. We certainly do appreciate it very much. The next comment is from Montana D'Agostino. They say, I thought about joining in the Ukraine war. Do you think I should?
Unless if you have military experience, I wouldn't highly recommend it because war. I don't have any military experience either, so don't think I'm speaking from like a position of experience. All I'm speaking from is a historical perspective because I've read tons of pages, and that's the closest I've gotten to actually being in a war. But I've read tons of pages of accounts from veterans and talked to loads of veterans in my life about what war is. And regardless of how much you get trained and prepared for war, war is hell on earth. While it's a necessary thing to go fight in wars, and one must understand that is a very tough thing. It's very dangerous, and it's not fun in the slightest. And so, with those three things being considered, it's not going to be glorious. It's going to be terrible. It's going to suck. No matter what side you're on, war sucks all the time, every day. I mean, I could recount stories about World War One soldiers because I've read up on World War One loads. That's kind of like my subject of interest and study as a kind of like history major is World War One, and I can tell you loads of stories about terrible things that soldiers had to deal with just on a daily basis in World War One, and it's continued like that through modern wars. That was kind of like the precedent of what modern warfare would become, minus the poison gas, in a way. But thank you very much for the support. And also, by the way, another thing is that Ukraine pays for your airfare over there, and they provide you the weapons. I don't know if they provide you any gear, but we do know that they provide the airfare and the weapon once you arrive. So if you do, that's up to you. If you do go over there, I wish you the best. I hope you stay safe, and I hope that Ukraine eventually does win this war. No matter how long it takes, I still have faith that they can win. And so I thank you very much for the support once again. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next is a question from Eamon Healy. He says, I love the stream. Do you think that the world reaction would make China think twice about invading Taiwan?
I think it already has, because it appeared at the beginning, and a lot of people were saying this, and this is one of the few times I can agree with what everyone's saying at the same time. It appeared that Russia and China were going to try and act in tandem, right? Right as one was acting in one place, the Chinese would act in the other. But then the Chinese were smart, and it's kind of like okay, you jump, we're going to both jump off at the bridge at the same time on three. They counted to three, and then the Russians jumped off, but they stayed on the bridge. That's kind of what they did to Russia, and they saw that when they jumped off the bridge, they didn't hit water. There was rocks like a foot below the water, and they just slammed into them and promptly turned into some red water. And so now they've seen that, and they've pretty much backed out all of their support, their direct support for Russia. They're denying military aid. They've lightly sanctioned them, not as heavily as the West, but they've lightly sanctioned them in some regards. And now they're not really saying a lot about Taiwan or doing anything. I'd also like for everyone to note that whenever the news brings up a Chinese jet is flown into Taiwanese airspace, that happens all the time. And now they're just bringing that up because it's the right time to. It's kind of like every single time that Russia and the United States would kind of get in a tense standoff over something, you would start seeing on the news all the time, Russian bomber is getting close to American airspace. It happens all the time. It's just that whenever it suits the news, they bring up these regular occurrences and act like they're new. So I just like for everyone to know that going forward into the future. And I hope I answered that question very well. And I thank you once again for your support. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Bradley Carriger. He says the Kiev Independent on Twitter is reporting that civilians in Mariupol are being forcibly moved to Russia. Have you heard about this?
Yes, we actually covered this a little bit earlier in the stream a while ago, and it is true that around 2,000 citizens of Mariupol have been deported from, well, not really deported, but they've been, I don't really know how to explain that. They've just kind of been grabbed and moved out of the city inside of Russia. No one really knows what's happening to them once they board these trains and get transported into Russia, but one can only assume that it must not be anything good. So I thank you very much for the support and the question. It's a good question that does deserve to be recapped, but I thank you once again. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and just a heads up, we do have about 13 to 14 super chat questions left to get to. The next one up is from Tin Brew. He says, as someone who served in the military, it's great to see this. It's amazing that there are people like you telling the story the best you can.
Well, I thank you very much, and I'm glad that I get a lot of support from veterans, because I do get a decent amount of hate, and I don't recognize people who hate on the channel because there's always going to be people who are displeased with something. But I have not seen a lot. I mean, like most of the people who hate on this channel never quote that they have military experience, but a lot of the people who do say that they support the channel do have prior military experience, and so it tells me that apparently I'm checking the right boxes and I'm saying the right kind of stuff for veterans to think, and they also have an experience, and that's why it's important for them to think that I do have some knowledge in this field, because it tells me that I'm at least landing my comments in the right area of being correct and kind of sound and normal military reasoning. So I thank you very much for the support, and also letting me know that you're a veteran. Once again, thank you very much for your service, and I hope I answered that question pretty well. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
The next question is from V43X V1CT15. They say 14,000 watching and 2,000 likes and only 28,000 subscribers. No excuse, guys. Go like and subscribe.
I kind of agree with the subscribing thing, but the thing, well, yeah, I actually subscribe a lot, really, come to think of it, because YouTube deletes thousands of my subscribers at random. Like last night, it looks like they may have deleted my subscribers, and from what you just said, because I was around 29,000 last night, let me go check. Apparently they did. So make sure everyone to subscribe, and make sure to hit the bell and also join the Discord, because while YouTube can delete you from my YouTube channel and unsubscribe you automatically, they cannot delete you from the Discord. And so you'll always be notified at least 10 minutes in advance of a stream starting, and you'll never miss them that way. We run the stream 10 p.m. Eastern time every single night, and so you know, that being said, I don't really think it's important for you to subscribe, because this comes on at a regular time every night. But please do. It helps us out a lot, and also like it, because it gets it out to more people. But once again, I thank you all very much for the support and the super chat. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
The next question is from Fox27. He asks, hey, what is your opinion on the UK Star Streak AA system, and if they will improve Ukraine air defense if they were to receive this system?
The UK Starstreak defense system is a decent one, but the problem is that it's unlike most air defense systems that are kind of fire and forget these days, and the operator actually has to guide the Starstreak to the target all the way. And so it's kind of more relegated to attacking helicopters more so than aircraft, because attacking aircraft with it is a little bit of a difficult situation. But I do think it's effective, and any kind of assistance rendered is good assistance. And the Russians do use a decent amount of helicopters, so I'm sure that it will find a nice niche to fill inside of this battlefield. So I do feel that that will be put to decent effect. And also, what was the last part of that question? I don't really believe I caught it.
So he asked your opinion on the UK Star Streak AA system, and if Ukraine were to receive that system, do you believe it would improve their air defenses?
It's okay. So I was just making sure I answered that last part, because it kind of was a blur to me, and I was like, did I answer that as well? Because I was already thinking about the Starstreak answer, so I did actually. So I hope that that answer was pretty decent, and it covered all the bases. And I thank you very much once again for the support and the super chat. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a question from Anthony Stark. He says, several Russian soldiers have simply deserted their post and equipment. Do you think it's got to be more popular with time? Have a drink on me.
Thank you very much for the drink. Unfortunately, I'm not drinking age, surprisingly. I'm actually just 20. So, you know, people can hack into my accounts easier. But anyways, moving on from that, the Russians are deserting in some places. But after the beginning of the war, and considering that this has gone on for about 3 weeks, I've actually seen that the reports of Russian prisoners of war have become less and less. And that would be highly publicized whenever it happens, because it's a demoralizing thing for the Russians to see that their own people are giving up. So I actually believe that that's happening less and less frequently as the war goes on, because both sides are getting more and more radicalized and dehumanizing the other side, and so they're going to be less and less likely to go over and surrender to the other side. So that being said, I thank you very much for the question and the support. It means a lot to us here at this channel. It helps us to continue running. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question is from the BK Knight 3. They say in 2019, Quantico did a war game in which Central Europe, South Korea, and Taiwan were hit simultaneously. What's your opinion? Should this occur this year?
I do not believe that that will occur this year. South Korea and North Korea have been making some strides, although that it's kind of been going a little bit backwards now. They made some strides in the past to actually try and get to be more friendly with each other. I don't really know if that will continue now, but South Korea has backing from the United States, so the North Koreans are never going to touch South Korea as long as the U.S. military is constantly present there, because that would incur a war that they really couldn't win. But the Chinese will support them, from what we believe, because they do have a military alliance with the North Koreans. So who knows? I mean, like, maybe that would turn into like World War III right there. But with Taiwan, I just don't really think the Chinese are really going to do anything about that this year. But then again, that's entirely my opinion. I don't really have a lot to back that up, rather than the Chinese carefully weigh their decisions based off of their economic growth, and anything that may hinder or damage their economic growth is something they will probably not pursue. So that's kind of my opinion on it, but I hope I answered that question pretty well. Thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Bring the Rain. They say, do you think that Georgia will take this opportunity to retake their lost territory since Russia pulled their troops out?
They may, but the problem is that since they're like little Russian puppet states, and Russia's the only country that recognizes them, once the war is over, they would probably go down there and just invade Georgia again and retake that land. But I mean, like, who knows? Maybe they wouldn't. But I don't really think the Georgians are going to try and capitalize on this and do anything, because they're already acting like their hands are tied, and they're not going to directly send official volunteers from the Georgian army to Ukraine because they're scared of Russia. So I don't really think they're going to do anything like that. But that entirely is my opinion. It may be different, and the Georgians may be eyeballing something like that. But once again, I thank you very much for your support, and I hope I answered that question pretty well. And that being said, how many questions do we have left? And then once you get through that, let's move on to the next question.
At the moment, we have about 10 super chats in the backlog, and then we can get to some other questions as well. So the next donation up is from Caffeine, leaves a $5 donation. Thank you very much again, Caffeine, for your continued support. Next question is from Mac Miles. He says, keep up the great work. And Mac, we certainly do appreciate the support from you once again as well. Let's see. The next question up is from 5 Bags of Popcorn. They say that you, Orton Rose, in Reddit is a good translator. Good job, mate.
Thank you very much for the support, and we will look into that, because we do have good translators right now. It's just that we haven't been able to utilize them as effectively as I'd like to, but we will look into that as well to see if we can maybe outsource some of our translating efforts if we need to, if for some reason the translators start getting backlogged. But I thank you very much once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Eric Bloom. He says, any recommendation on where I can donate for Ukraine and its military? I already gave to Sunflowers for Peace.
I like that donation. That sounds like a nice one. I'm sure that the sunflowers will grow in a completely non-human area of land that doesn't have dead Russians on it. But I don't really know if anywhere you can directly donate to the Ukrainian military. But if you do have an itch to donate, my channel has done a donation before where we raised $29.1 thousand for the American Red Cross, which is active in Ukraine. And we're also doing a fundraiser tomorrow for Doctors Without Borders, and they will also be they are also actually in Ukraine right now, and so we're trying to support organizations that we can, that YouTube allows us to, that are currently working inside of Ukraine to help the Ukrainian people. And so if you would like to donate, because unfortunately I don't know of anything that donates directly to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and it's really difficult to donate to them. I tried to look into it, and you have to like write them a check and mail it, and there's like it's not as easy as like other donating sources. So unfortunately, I don't really know of an easy way to do that. There is a way, but it's incredibly difficult. So if you would like to donate, make sure that your money goes to effective and immediate causes. Probably come back tomorrow, because the Doctors Without Borders fundraiser will be up and running. And so that way we can help them out as much as possible, and in turn they will help out the Ukrainians a whole load. They're an incredibly good organization. And so I highly recommend that you donate to them if you would like to donate to anyone. But then again, that's all up to you. And I thank you very much once again for the support and the question. And that being said, we're going to move on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a donation from Christian Allenson Fisher. They say, I watch this every night. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much for the support and the super chat. I'm very glad that you're a fan, and I love that we have a lot of return fans nightly. It means a lot to me, because I'd like to know that people respect my work and the amount of time I put into it, because I'm honored that everyone's here still watching my streams, because there's so many people who do cover this content. There's so many options out there right now, but I'm just so glad that a lot of y'all just enjoy my content to the point that y'all come back and watch it nightly. And so I thank y'all very much once again, and I thank you very much once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple of donations. We have a donation from Bearcat, Takata Store, and also Andy Yao. We thank you very much for your support to the channel. You are making what we do possible, and we very much appreciate it. Next question we have is from Jay Rillo. He says, did you ever check out Gonzalo Lira's info?
Actually, I have not. I've been very busy today. There was a couple of things that had to be tended to, and so I didn't have a lot of time. But I did get to Knuckles, so so it's like a general thing. This isn't like a sin that I'm repeatedly doing. I did get to Knuckles, and I did actually watch that video, but I didn't have enough time today to check out Gonzalez. But if you can send me a Discord chat after this, like a DM, and make sure to hit me up on that, and maybe in the middle of the day tomorrow, do that as well, just in case if I haven't. I will try and check them out and take a look into it. But thank you once again for the support, and I'm sorry that I haven't looked into that, but I will try. I promise you, I'm trying to get to all the stuff. But thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
The next question is from Bradley Carragher. He says that the Ukraine Vice Prime Minister said today that 562 Russian POWs were taken today. What are your thoughts?
If that's true, that's a huge number. That's actually that's as many Russians that the Russians said have been killed in Ukraine so far. So that's a lot. I don't really know if that's true. I haven't actually gotten that news from any of my mods or myself looking around. But if that is true, that's actually a pretty big number that they've taken from the entire country. So if that's true, the Russians might not have an army left after a couple of more weeks of that. So I thank you very much for bringing that up. And if that's true, we will certainly cover that in tomorrow's stream. Thank you once again for the support. And we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another question from longtime channel supporter Geoff L. He says the fuel tanks were train cars on day 1 or 2.
Can you do you know what that's trying to say, Matthew? Because I don't really think I called on that.
I'm not really sure if it's a question. I think it's more of just a statement. It was probably in reference to something you were mentioning earlier, but I'm not really sure what he's referring to.
It may have been the railroad logistics, but I'm sorry. I hate to do this, but I can't really follow that question. I don't really know what it's talking about to really talk about it much. But if you're talking about fuel cars on a train, we do know that one fuel train got hit near Belgorod and exploded somewhere around there. So that is good news if you're talking about railroad cars and them carrying fuel supplies. But once again, I thank you very much for the question and the support. I'm sorry I really couldn't touch on that one. I don't really know what it's in reference to. But that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Green Powder. They say the use of thermobaric weapons is not a war crime.
I'm sure that it is. Let me check. Is using thermobaric weapons a war crime? Let's see. Let me check this. I want to make sure that what I've been saying has been true, because I've been hearing that this is a war crime, and if it's not, thermobarics in a war. Alright, so apparently it's not a war crime to use them, but it is a war crime if they're used against civilians. But I believe that's the general rule with everything. I don't believe anyone gets a pass if an unguided bomb is hitting a house as well. So apparently what I was hearing was out of context. Apparently it isn't a war crime to use thermobarics on enemy personnel, but it is a war crime to use them on civilians. So thank you for clarifying that for me, because that is something that I heard and ran with, and I really shouldn't have, because apparently it's only a war crime if used against civilians. So thank you very much once again for the super chat and bringing that to my attention. It's very important to get things cleared up, and I'm glad that you cleared that up for me. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and the final super chat we have for the night is from Gene Kraus. He leaves a $2 donation, and Gene, we very much appreciate your support. And with that, that concludes our super chats. And whenever you're ready, I have some non-super chat questions ready to ask.
Got you. So we're going to answer 3 of these, and then we'll end the stream. So the first question is...
The first question is from Mr. Jim. He says, how much effect will the Switchblade kamikaze drones have in Ukraine?
I feel like they'll have a decent effect, because the little drones that have been used in Azerbaijan, Armenia, Syria, Iraq, and so on in the previous years have shown us that drones that explode around people are incredibly effective. So, it's considering that the Switchblade is nothing more than a super well-developed version of a crude drone with explosives attached, suggests to me that it will be useful. So we don't know how useful yet. We'll have to see, because I don't really think these things have actually been used in a war before. So we'll have to see how effective they are in combat, and then get back around to that and circle around and see, to give a clear answer whether they are effective or not. But I do thank you for the question. A lot of people have been asking about the Switchblades, and they have a really cool development, a really cool history to their development process. So make sure to go check that out if you'd like to on the side, because that is something just very interesting. But nonetheless, I thank you very much for the question, and it's actually a pretty good one. And so that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and our next question is from Marie, and this question was asked quite a lot during the chat tonight, and this is the one that I chose to ask. She says, if Russia were to use hypersonic missiles, which they have, do you think that they will get desperate enough to use a tactical nuclear missile?
I'm not really sure. I mean, like, that's a really tough one to answer, because Putin is an unhinged freak. So we don't really know if he would do something like that. But considering they're using hypersonic... Well, the thing is, to me, though, is that I don't really consider this hypersonic missile to be a big deal. While it's its first time being used in war, it's not really providing anything extra that normal ballistic missiles have already not been able to do. Because it hit a target in Ivano, Frankivsk. And ballistic missiles, as we know, have been hitting targets inside of Kiev, Kharkiv, Sumy, Lviv, Kherson, Mykolaiv, Severodonetsk, Kramatorsk, any city you can name, Poltava, Dnipro, Zaporizhia. We know that cruise missiles have been hitting, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and so on have been hitting in all of these cities at one point or another. And so the hypersonic missile hasn't done anything that the normal ballistic missiles already haven't done. So in that regard, I don't really think it's a huge step up. But to just answer the nuclear question in general, I'm not really sure. It could really, like, honestly, it could go that direction. Maybe they would use a nuke, but I'm not entirely sure. It could really go either way at this point. But I thank you once again for your question. It's a very good one, and it's asked a lot, and it is a very good question about the hypersonic missile. It's just that I kind of feel like its capabilities have been hyped up. The speed isn't that high, really. But nonetheless, I thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the final question.
Okay, and our final question of the night comes from Fly Lord. He says, are Russians using cremation machines to hide their war crimes?
I'm not really sure. We do know that they have the little trucks that can cremate dead bodies, but I don't really know how much they're using them because we did see the dead man convoy in Belarus today, where they were actually bringing through dead bodies. But I don't really know if they're using the crematory machines to hide up war crimes, because if they were, we wouldn't be seeing as much as we have been. But we've actually seen a lot of war crimes, a lot of dead civilians and people all over. So I don't really think they are, but I think in some areas they may be trying to. But who knows? That's entirely opinions and assumptions, and I don't really have enough evidence to back up anything going either way. And so I thank you very much for that question once again. I'm sorry I don't have enough information to answer it. But with that being said, we've actually reached the end of this stream. So far, day 24 appears to have gone pretty decently for the Ukrainians. They are once again holding. And so I thank you all very much for watching. The stream comes on at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every day. If you enjoyed what you were watching, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to hit the bell as well, because it will notify you when these streams go live. Just in case if you got a little busy and you want to watch the streams and you forgot about it, it will let you know that it did come on. And I say that it starts at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, but just remember, everyone, it is 10 minutes behind every day, because I do have to do some things behind the scenes. So the actual stream starts at 10:10 Eastern Time, but the actual stream is put up at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Just want to make sure that it's clear to everyone, so that way no one's thinking I'm late. It is on time. It's just that it's not the listed time in a way, I guess. But nonetheless, I thank you all once again. Thank you all very much for the support. We've gotten a load of support tonight, and I hope that everyone gives as much support as possible tomorrow to the Doctors Without Borders fundraiser, because I will be as well. So help me help Ukraine, if anything. And so I thank you all once again, and I hope you all have a great night.